Chapter 1432. Yes, Your Majesty. General Qing took off his helmet with tassels, and a few strands of his messy hair fell down. He didn't show the slightest bit of unwillingness to accept his punishment. He just knelt on the ground and kowtowed 3 times, then walked out of the imperial palace alone. Sir, are you satisfied with this punishment? Lord Hu asked Lin Yu. Lin Yu nodded and said, General Qing has fought alongside you for many years, and your son calls him uncle. It's not wrong for him to protect his son today. However, I have nothing to say about you sending General Qing to the border to protect the 7th prince. Lin Yu had already seen through everything and said lightly. Lord Hu's expression changed. Obviously, he had underestimated Lin Yu's temperament. However, Lin Yu did not say anything else. It could be said that he did not care about this matter in the first place. The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion smiled, and did not say anything about Lord Hu's punishment. Marquis Hu already knew that the 7th prince had committed countless crimes in Royal City. However, he had met a tough opponent today, and failed to escape the calamity. Why don't you stay in Royal City for a few more days? Lord Hu invited. He was very magnanimous, and did not hold a grudge against Lin Yu because of his son. Lord Hu was ambitious, and would not affect the overall situation because of a small matter. Perhaps he already knew about Wang Xiang's betrayal. He should also know that Yi Futian had used the God's Court to kill Wang Xiang. Soon, the major forces of the North Star Ancient Kingdom will be here to hold an auction. I think you should be interested, said the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion. This was also one of the purposes of Lin Yu's trip. It was to exchange for some divine items. Lin Yu nodded and said, I'll stay here for a few more days. Xing said that he would come to Royal City in a few days. During these few days, Lin Yu could refine the power in his body. He wanted to improve his cultivation. Lord Hu personally arranged a residence for Lin Yu. It was not known how the news had spread to the Royal City, but for a moment there was an uproar. Unexpectedly, there was an official from the Royal City who personally came to the inn to bring some holy medicine for the waiter. He even seemed apologetic. This caused everyone to be incomparably shocked. They were all guessing Lin Yu's identity. In recent days, the 7th prince was nowhere to be seen. Some people had already guessed something. Perhaps the 7th prince had already been robbed. Otherwise, the royal officials would not have come to the inn in person to pay for the 7th prince's mistake. This was naturally Fu Ho's intention. He wouldn't care about the life and death of a commoner. It was all to curry favor with Lin Yu and win over people's hearts. Now there's finally one less tumor in Monarch City. After a few days, Wang Qing issued an order that the 7th prince would be sent to the border and would never be allowed to set foot in Wangqing again. Everyone sighed. The 7th prince had been doing evil for decades, and now he was finally getting his retribution. 7 days passed in the blink of an eye. The forces within the imperial capital of the Gaochen ancient country had arrived at the royal city. Among them, there were a few vassal states nearby. They had also heard the news and came over. This was a grand event that was held once every 10 years. The Gaochen ancient country was a major force in the imperial capital. They had a strong background and their residence was connected to the outside world. The 5 eastern vassal states attached great importance to this event and sent special envoys here. Moreover, the items auctioned by the major forces were also very tempting. There were divine items required for the 10th step in the residence. There were also relics brought from the outside world of the Gaochen ancient country. Each of these items had a great origin. Even the marquises would covet them. However, the major forces had their own rules. The marquises could not participate in the auction. Instead, they brought the items that the marquises needed and could use them to exchange. This auction was open to rogue cultivators and some sects and forces in the Gaochen ancient country to ensure fairness and justice. In the past few days, Many rogue cultivators and sects had already crossed several vassal states and arrived at the royal city of Huho. Even though the royal city occupied 1,000 miles, it could barely accommodate so many people. This was definitely going to be a grand event. Huho had also prepared for a long time. Therefore, they specially built a new city in the royal city to accommodate the various forces. On this day, Lin Yu also left the royal palace. "I'm old and have nothing to do. I'll go take a look as well." The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion and Lin Yu arrived at the city that was specially built to accommodate forces. To be precise, the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion was only a force in Huho. It was not ruled by Huho. Therefore, it was not a big problem for them to come here. Although it was called a city, it was only built with walls and buildings. It was even more prosperous than the royal city. People came and went in an endless stream. One could see powerful cultivators riding all kinds of strange beasts descending here. One faction was powerful and prosperous. Some large sects brought their disciples here to broaden their horizons. There were also powerful rogue cultivators who came and went alone, looking for a place to stay on the street. Lin Yu looked at this scene calmly. The boy behind the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion had already found a place to stay. It was the most prosperous area in the city within the city. It was a building that overlooked the entire royal city. The building was antique in style and had a total of 30 floors. The maidservants inside were at least second-step cultivators and were beautiful enough to captivate birds and beasts. The name of the restaurant was Full Moon Restaurant. The words on the plaque were elegant and elegant. At the same time, they had a certain Tao charm and were written by a certain master. "There are many powerful cultivators in Full Moon Restaurant," the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion reminded. He had already learned a lot before coming here. Lin Yu nodded. They arrived at the 20th floor. A maidservant brought them upstairs with graceful step. "There will be a banquet in Full Moon Restaurant in a while. At that time, you guys can come downstairs to drink and enjoy the dancing. If you need anything, you can tell me." In the end, the maidservant brought Lin Yu to a room. The maidservant said to Lin Yu while casting flirtatious glances at him. Lin Yu nodded. "Thank you, but I don't need it." Naturally, he knew what she meant. After seeing Lin Yu's rejection, the maidservant's eyes revealed a dejected look. The maids were all carefully selected women from other regions. Their purpose in coming here was to find powerful Tao companions. The maidservant naturally knew the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion. When she saw Lin Yu walking with the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion, she had an idea. However, she was rejected by Lin Yu directly. "If you have any instructions later, just ring the bell. Xiaoya will be there immediately." The maidservant had a beaded curtain and looked hazy. "Thank you," Lin Yu said. Lin Yu did not look at the maidservant from the beginning to the end. This caused a trace of disappointment to appear in the eyes of the maid who called herself Little Ya. Chapter 1433. After Lin Yu rested in his room for a while, the pavilion master of the Heaven's Secret Pavilion ordered a servant to come to Lin Yu's room. "Sir, the pavilion master has invited you to a banquet," the servant said respectfully. Lin Yu replied. Then, he came to the bottom of the Bright Moon Inn. The banquet was about to begin. By now, it was already full of people. The pavilion master of the Heaven's Secret Pavilion had been waiting for a long time. At this moment, the maidservant named Xiaoya saw Lin Yu coming. However, she was in the arms of another middle-aged man, and was grumbling coquettishly to stop the man from touching her. Lin Yu brushed past them, but he did not even look at Xiaoya. "Sir Lin Yu, this way please." When the servant saw that Lin Yu had come, he immediately led the way. The man seemed to have sensed that something was wrong with Xiaoya. When he saw Lin Yu's appearance, he said with a hint of jealousy, "Is that the pretty boy that you took a fancy to earlier on?" "Yes, pretty boy. Did you see that? Even the pavilion master of the Heaven's Secret Pavilion of the Hu country has such an attitude." Xiaoya said. The dimness in her eyes gradually turned into hatred. She felt that she was pretty good-looking. Furthermore, her cultivation base was at the 4th step. She was one of the best among all the maidservants. Now that she was being looked down upon by Lin Yu, she could not help but want to teach Lin Yu a lesson. Therefore, she tried to sow discord between the man and Lin Yu. However, Xiaoya did not know that among all the girls that Lin Yu had seen, there were more than a few who were prettier than her. He knew what Xiaoya was thinking. However, he was not interested. That was all. He did not look down on anyone. Perhaps it was just his personality. However, the way that the man looked at Lin Yu changed. He said, "Is that so?" There was a playful look in his eyes. In his opinion, Lin Yu did not look very old. In this world, the suppression of the Great Path was very serious. Even a powerhouse at the 10th step only had a lifespan of 10,000 years. It wasn't as if there weren't any spells or pills that could change one's appearance. However, the aura of time emanating from his body couldn't be concealed at all. The 6th step of cultivation is not bad. You can be considered outstanding, the man said slowly. Gradually, a playful look appeared in his eyes as he continued, "However, what I like the most is to suppress outstanding talents." The man's background was extremely high. He was a deacon of the Heavenly Sword sect in the Gauchan royal capital. In the Sky Rapier sect, there were people who were at the peak of the 9th step and were about to break through to the 10th step. After reaching the 8th step, every realm was divided into 10 layers. Each layer was separated by a huge chasm that was difficult to cross. To be able to reach the peak of the 9th step in 10,000 years was already a rare existence in this world. As such, the Skysword sect was one of the few sects in the Gauchan ancient nation that was valued by the dynasty. At this moment, Lin Yu had already taken his seat. "I just did a divination. You seem to be in a bit of trouble," the pavilion lord said with a smile. "However, I'm getting more and more curious about you. This is because it's difficult for me to accurately divine something about you. I can only use everything around me to divine a trace of your future." The pavilion lord did not hide anything. He was worried that Lin Yu would not be able to divine his own future. At this moment, the ancient characters in Lin Yu's sea of consciousness released a strand of power. He looked at Xiaoya and the man. Coincidentally, the man was also looking at him. The few of them looked at each other. But to Lin Yu, these people were nothing more than jumping clowns, not worthy of being shown in public. The man was only at the 7th step. If he insisted on provoking Lin Yu did not recommend killing him. "It's those two," Lin Yu said. His words were calm, without the slightest ripple of emotion. The pavilion lord was a little surprised. "You know the art of divination as well?" The pavilion lord's divination art had a mysterious origin. It was said that it was passed down from the first god master. However, the pavilion lord did not know the exact details. Lin Yu nodded his head gently. "I know a little about it." The more he reached this stage, the more he could sense the might of the ancient characters. Even at the utmost state, these ancient characters were still extremely useful, and had been wielded by many utmost beings in the past. However, the 9 ancient characters that Lin Yu had grasped were ones that no one had ever grasped before. It was just that before the utmost being fell, he had imprinted them in the ancient well. Thereafter, they were grasped by Lin Yu. After the pavilion lord said this, Lin Yu's expression was a little weird. There seemed to be a familiar aura coming from the pavilion lord. However, there seemed to be some sort of item with such an aura on him. Therefore, Lin Yu could not detect it. This had Lin Yu puzzled. Logically speaking, this should be his first time in this world. He had never come into contact with it before. Why did Lin Yu feel a sense of familiarity in this place? This was a mystery, and he had no idea. Perhaps this world already had a place of origin. Or perhaps powerful beings from the universe had arrived here before. Lin Yu thought to himself. That was the only explanation that made sense. The pavilion lord merely smiled faintly. Just as the banquet started, the dancers started dancing under the curtains. Their movements were graceful and even beautiful. One could not help but praise them. The Minghui nunnery is truly worthy of being a famous sect in the entire Gaochen ancient nation. Not only is it very powerful, its disciples all have their own merit. If they were placed in other places, they would definitely be exceptional beauties. The pavilion lord drank a cup of wine with Lin Yu and said, "If this old man were a few hundred years younger, I would definitely find a disciple of Bright Moon Nunnery. No, an elder would definitely be even more charming." The pavilion lord smacked his lips and licked his saliva back. Lin Yu was speechless. However, he understood that the power that built this Bright Moon Inn was the Bright Moon Nunnery of the Gaochen ancient nation. They were all female cultivators, and most of them were Tao companions with powerful beings. Their hidden strength was unimaginable. There were rumors that even if one were to encounter the Sky Sword sect, they would not dare to offend the Bright Moon Nunnery. From this, one could tell how horrifying the power of the Bright Moon Nunnery was. What a pity, what a pity. This dancer should at least be a descendant. I wonder why she came to the Fuho country this time. The pavilion lord looked at the graceful figure behind the curtains, hating the heavens for robbing him of a few hundred years. Pavilion lord, your heart is still young. Lin Yu couldn't help but smile. He calmly looked at the curtains. However, everyone's gaze was focused on her right now. Although the woman's appearance was only faintly discernible, her graceful figure was enough to cause people's imagination to run wild. At one moment, she was like a fairy from the heavens, elegant and otherworldly. At the next moment, she was like a demoness from the underworld, endlessly charming. In any case, as the zither music continued to play, some people even forgot about the wine cups in their hands. "Right, are you proficient in the art of alchemy?" the pavilion lord asked. "Can you refine a few of those pills? Aphrodisiac?" Lin Yu said, "Of course, there's no problem." The pavilion lord was overjoyed and continued, "This time, the saintess of the Bright Moon Nunnery is here to prove the legend. This time, she's here to find a Tao companion. I'm sure it's me." Faced with the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion's pavilion master's words, coupled with his originally sage-like appearance, Xiao Chen could not help but frown. "I'll refine it for you in a bit." Lin Yu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Chapter 1434. As the music reached its climax and the saintess of the Minghui nunnery danced, a strange phenomenon occurred. The lotuses in the pond bloomed, and the fish jumped out of the water. "I didn't expect the saintess of the Minghui nunnery to have such high attainments. She has already entered the Tao through music," someone exclaimed with admiration in his eyes. Those who could enter the Minghui Hotel were not weaklings. Some of them were not interested in the auction, but had heard the news and came specifically for the saintess of the Minghui nunnery. The people of the Minghui nunnery had the best dual cultivation method in the entire North Star ancient nation. Especially the saintess. It was said that the saintess of this generation had cultivated the divine techniques of the Minghui nunnery to an extremely high level. Therefore, the heroes of this generation all flocked to the saintess of the Minghui nunnery. The saintess was even more attractive than the legendary items in the auction. Lin Yu listened to the discussions of the crowd. However, he was still very calm. His cultivation had not reached a stagnant stage. He only needed enough pills to make a breakthrough. However, the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secret Pavilion could not hold back anymore. "Old man, it's time to wipe your saliva." Xing arrived at this moment. His cultivation had reached the late stage of the 7th step, and he was very powerful. However, he was still dressed in a black robe and had a mysterious aura. Everyone loves beauty. The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secret Pavilion was not embarrassed at all. He wiped the saliva from the corner of his mouth with his sleeve. There was an indescribable emotion in his eyes when he looked at Xing. Xing went to his seat. When he saw the saintess of the Mingyuan nunnery behind the curtain, his body trembled. However, it did not seem to be because of the saintess dance. It was because of some unknown emotion. The saintess of the Mingyuan nunnery glanced at Xing inadvertently with her limpid eyes. There was a different emotion in her eyes. Lin Yu's divine consciousness was very powerful. He was probably at the peak of the 8th step now. He could clearly sense the performance of Xing and the saintess of the Mingyuan nunnery. The two of them definitely knew each other. However, Lin Yu did not know what the relationship between the two of them was. However, the two of them only looked at each other before Xing said, "I still need to consolidate my cultivation, so I can't stay here for long." With that, he excused himself and left the place. The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion did not say much. He seemed to understand something. Bright Moon Hotel no longer has any empty rooms. Why don't you make do with Lin Yu? The pavilion master of the secret pavilion suggested. There was a strange look in Xing's eyes, but he did not refuse. The boy led Xing to Lin Yu's room. As for Lin Yu, he continued to drink with the pavilion master of the secret pavilion. Just as Lin Yu and the others were drinking, an uninvited guest quietly arrived. Xiaoye and the man arrived. The man sat directly in front of Lin Yu and said with a smile, "Brother, I see that you have the looks of a celestial being and have been paying attention to you for a long time. Would you do me the honor of drinking a few cups with me?" Then, he bowed slightly to the pavilion master of the secret pavilion and said, "I've already heard of the pavilion master of the secret pavilion when I was in the imperial capital. It's an honor to meet you at last." However, there was no trace of respect in his eyes. He appeared to be very frivolous. "I am the Sky Sword Sect Chu Bin," the man said slowly with a hint of arrogance. The Sky Sword Sect was one of the 5 strongest sects in the entire North Star ancient nation. Even though he knew that the pavilion master of the secret pavilion was not simple, he did not show any respect. In his opinion, even if the pavilion master of the secret pavilion was not simple and had terrifying rumors, he was still just a small faction in a vassal state. In front of a colossus like the Sky Sword Sect, he was just a speck of light. The pavilion master of the secret pavilion did not answer. He only took a sip of wine with a playful look on his face. Lin Yu was also very calm as he said, "Are you done? If you are, you can leave." His words did not give the man any face at all. Lin Yu did not feel the slightest bit of fear because the man had said that he was from the Sky Sword Sect. "You!" Chu Bin faced Lin Yu's indifference and spoke with an intent to chase him away. His eyes couldn't help but turn cold. "Do you know who you are talking to?" Chu Bin said icily. "I came here to give you face. Don't be so shameless." Lin Yu raised his wine cup and took a sip. Then, he slowly put it down and said, "I'm also giving you face by letting you go." In other words, the fact that Lin Yu didn't say, "Get lost," was already the greatest forgiveness he could give to the man. Lin Yu's aura was indescribable. Even if the sky fell and the earth cracked, he would not change his expression. This was an aura that was naturally formed after being in a high position for a long time. No one could imitate it. At this moment, Xiaoye also saw this and was stunned for a moment. Even the man felt a sudden shock in his heart. However, he quickly came back to his senses. He was a 7th step existence. As a deacon in the entire Sky Sword Sect, he had a high status. However, he had been temporarily intimidated by an unknown young man. "You are courting death. Do you know the consequences of not giving the Sky Sword Sect any face?" The man smashed the table with his palm. Lin Yu's cold attitude had directly interrupted his plan. He had not expected that he would be the first to be flustered and exasperated. "Sky Sword Sect? What is it?" The pavilion master of the Sky Secret Pavilion said indifferently, "You have disturbed Lin Yu and me. Now kneel down and admit your mistake." The pavilion master of the Sky Secret Pavilion was extremely domineering. His intimidating aura silenced the entire banquet. Although the pavilion master's cultivation was only at the 7th step, the aura on his body was extremely intimidating. It's just as the legends say. The pavilion master of the sky's secret pavilion of the Hu Marquis state was once at the 9th step, but for some unknown reason, his cultivation level fell. Those who knew were extremely shocked at this moment. Even if his cultivation level fell, the aura of a 9th step existence was still not something that ordinary people could withstand. He looked at Chu Bin indifferently. At this moment, Chu Bin felt immense pressure and almost knelt down. Even with a 7th step cultivation, he could not withstand the pavilion master's aura. Now the entire banquet was incomparably quiet. The moment the pavilion master of the sky's secret pavilion spoke, Lin Yu also slowly rose to his feet. Boom! His speed was like a ghost. There was no time for anyone to react. Although Lin Yu's Dao fruit was restricted, he could still use his remarkable abilities. When the world's end near at hand was used at such a short distance, perhaps even an 8th step powerhouse would find it difficult to react. Lin Yu kicked Chu Bin's lower abdomen. The terrifying force was like a divine mountain crashing into him. Although Lin Yu's cultivation was only at the 6th step, the strength of his battle constitution was much stronger than that of an ordinary 7th step cultivator. Chu Bin flew several meters away. With a thud, he could not withstand the force and knelt on the ground, blood dripping from the corners of his mouth. He could not believe that Lin Yu's strength was so terrifying. His internal organs were kicked out of their original positions. Even he would not be able to recover from this injury in a short period of time. Now that he had lost control of his body, it would be difficult for him to get up in a short time. He knelt on the ground in a humiliating posture. Lin Yu only looked at the scene indifferently, as if dealing with a 7th step powerhouse was nothing to him. That's right. The pavilion master of the sky's secret pavilion stroked his beard. However, everyone present was flabbergasted. They were not weaklings, and most of them knew people from the Sky Sword sect. When they saw a 7th step powerhouse being kicked to the ground by a 6th step cultivator and unable to move, they were all in disbelief. Chapter 1435. Everyone was terrified by the strength of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion's pavilion master and Lin Yu. They attacked without a word. They didn't care if you were from the Sky Sword sect or other sections. This caused everyone to retreat. In their hearts, they felt that the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion's pavilion master and Lin Yu were definitely existences that could not be provoked. Unless you were stronger than Chu Bin in terms of background or cultivation. The sound of the zither stopped abruptly. Chu Bin felt ashamed when he saw everyone's eyes on him. He stood up with difficulty in the midst of the humiliation. You've offended the Sky Sword sect. You'll have to bear our wrath. He gnashed his teeth. Xiaoyao, who was standing by the side, was stunned. For a moment she did not know what to do. Is that so? The pavilion lord said calmly. He didn't care about the Sky Sword sect at all. He didn't seem to be afraid at all. The organization of the Divine Court was very mysterious. Even some terrifying forces were very afraid of it. The Heavenly Secrets Pavilion's pavilion master truly did not fear the Heavenly Sword sect. Lin Yu took a step forward, ready to attack again. Gentlemen, can you give me some face? This is the Mingyue Pavilion. A graceful woman pulled the curtain aside and appeared in front of everyone. She had an appearance that could turn all living things upside down. Her figure was graceful, and her charm caused everyone to shift their gazes over. For a moment they were all stunned. She was the saintess of the Mingyue nunnery, Lu Rushi. This was indeed the Mingyue nunnery's place. Lin Yu didn't have any feud with the Mingyue nunnery, so he stopped. He didn't care about Chu Bin anymore. Since the saintess of the Mingyue nunnery has spoken, I'll give you some face. The pavilion lord stroked his beard and said, Lin Yu, come back. Thank you, pavilion lord. Lu Rushi bowed and continued, Thank you, young Master Lin. Lu Rushi had been well-mannered since she was young. She was very good at etiquette. She took good care of everyone. Xiaoya, the Lord of the Sky Sword Sect, is going to treat his injuries and get some medicine from the elixir room, Lu Rushi continued. Then she personally arranged seats for Lin Yu and Chu Bin. The banquet continued. However, some of them felt grateful to Chu Bin. It was because of him that they were able to witness Lu Rushi's beauty. Lu Rushi handled the situation well and soon calmed the storm. At this moment, Xiaoya was supporting Chu Bin. Her heart had already turned cold. After this incident, although Lu Rushi did not say anything, she would definitely be punished. At the same time, he also witnessed Lin Yu's strength. He deeply regretted his stupidity just now. Even if Lin Yu had ignored him just now, if he could have fawned over him again, things wouldn't have turned out this way. After the storm calmed down. Behind the curtain, Lu Rushi could not help but take another look at Lin Yu. She seemed to be thinking about something. The banquet ended late into the night. Everyone was still unsatisfied, and they drank for a long time at the table. However, Lin Yu returned to his room first. He was not really interested in the banquet. If it weren't for the pavilion leader's invitation, he wouldn't have come at all. The auction would start in 3 days, and they were still in the midst of preparations. After Lin Yu returned to his room, he saw Xing sitting cross-legged on the ground. There was a bedding below him. Lin Yu was a little confused. When Xing saw Lin Yu return, he said, "Brother Lin, don't misunderstand. I'm just not used to sleeping with others." Lin Yu nodded and said, "I need to go out." He wanted to go to the auction to sell the elixirs he had refined in exchange for some divine objects. "Are you going to the auction?" Xing asked. Lin Yu nodded. After walking out of the Bright Moon Hotel, Lin Yu came to the main hall of the auction. There were people in charge of registration here. Even though it was late at night, there were still people sitting here. In the auction, not only would there be divine objects brought from the imperial capital, but there would also be some cultivators' items. For medicinal pills, there had always been a demand but no supply. This was especially so for the true spirit elixir that Lin Yu had refined. Only a few people knew the recipe. Furthermore, it was extremely difficult to refine and its medicinal effects were extremely shocking. Therefore, it was extremely rare to see it in an auction in the entire North Star ancient country. "Fellow cultivator, do you have any items to auction?" The person in charge of registration and verification was an old man. His eyes were filled with wisdom. "I'm here to auction a few elixirs," Lin Yu said. "Are you an alchemist?" the old man asked. There weren't many alchemists in the entire North Star ancient country. The requirements for cultivators were extremely strict. Moreover, in this world, strength was everything. Although elixirs were extremely important to cultivators, they were only supplementary. Spending a huge amount of money to study the art of alchemy would only hinder one's cultivation. Therefore, in the North Star ancient country, it was rare to see someone like Lin Yu, who could refine elixirs and cultivate at the same time. After all, a person's energy was limited. Lin Yu nodded lightly. As for the other items, he didn't have much. The old man was very wise. He didn't ask too much. Earlier, he only registered Lin Yu's identity. Therefore, everyone felt confident in their hearts during the auction. "May I know what grade of elixirs you want to auction?" The old man looked at Lin Yu and didn't have much hope. This was because Lin Yu looked too young. Even if he had terrifying talent, he would only be a 3rd or 4th grade alchemist. However, this kind of elixir could only be used in an auction like this. It wouldn't cause too much of a commotion. "I have a lot of elixirs here," Lin Yu said. As he waved his hand, dozens of jade bottles appeared on the table. The old man remained calm. He could tell with a single glance that most of the elixirs here were 4th or 5th grade. However, this also exceeded his expectations. Lin Yu's grade as an alchemist was a level higher than he expected. The old man nodded slightly and said, "I'll verify the medicinal strength for you right away." It was rare to see such a young fifth-grade alchemist in the North Star ancient country. He deserved to be treated well. However, when he opened a few jade bottles, he was shocked by the quality of the elixirs inside. The fourth and fifth grade elixirs all had 9 patterns. This was a sign that the quality of the elixirs had reached the pinnacle. These elixirs. The old man was speechless for a moment. Although there were only 4th or 5th grade elixirs here, because of the patterns on them, their value would increase by several times. The toxicity of these elixirs was almost non-existent. It was very effective for some large forces to lay the foundation for their juniors. After he verified them one by one, he came to the last 2 jade bottles. Lin Yu didn't pay much attention to them. He placed these elixirs casually. Therefore, the old man didn't realize what he was going to see next. When he opened the last 2 jade bottles, he originally thought that they would also be 4th or 5th grade elixirs with 9 patterns. However, a ray of light rushed up, and the entire hall was filled with the fragrance of medicine. This is. While the old man was shocked, he immediately used a method to seal all the medicinal strength. The sound of wind and thunder could be heard faintly. A 7th grade elixir that survived the pill lightning. The old man was shocked. However, Lin Yu was very calm. The old man was excited. After the ray of light disappeared, the elixir inside appeared. There were also 9 runes on it. A 7th grade elixir with 9 patterns. This was rare in the entire North Star ancient country. It was usually priceless. Chapter 1436. As long as a pill was born, it meant that there would be a crazy fight for it. The old man's eyes were filled with shock. He couldn't regain his senses for a while. He only reacted after a long time. He was wrong all along. The young man in front of him wasn't a 5th grade alchemist. He was a 7th grade alchemist. It was rare to see someone like that in the entire ancient country. As long as one's identity was known by others, it was likely that even the legendary great sects would want to invite one to enter their sects as a guest elder. Moreover, Lin Yu didn't look old. This meant that his potential was limitless. The old man came from the imperial capital of the Gauchan ancient country. He knew a few alchemists. Some of them were 7th grade and even 8th grade alchemists. However, it was impossible for them to have such attainments at his age. Moreover, this 7th grade pill had 9 runes. It was an existence that had passed the pill tribulation. Its value was immeasurable. However, the old man soon realized that the alchemist in front of him seemed to be worth much more than this pill. If he could take him into his camp, however, this was only a thought in the old man's mind. Such a young 7th grade alchemist. He was probably born in an alchemy family. That was why he had such high attainments. The Gauchan ancient country was vast. There were many secluded sects in it. Naturally, there were many alchemy powers. Only those who came from those secluded sects would have such talent. Did you refine this grade 7 elixir? The old man's attitude had already become very respectful. In this world, those who were more capable were the teachers. If Lin Yu was really a 7th grade alchemist, he was worthy of the old man's respect. Lin Yu nodded. He didn't deny it. What he needed was to increase the value of his pill. If he said that he got it from somewhere else, he would be coveted by others. He might as well say that he refined it himself. Now that he knew the strength of the divine court, he didn't believe that there was anyone in those sects who could threaten him. "I'll arrange for your pill to be auctioned immediately," said the old man. "Thank you," said Lin Yu. "This is the VIP seat. You can use this badge to enter one of the private rooms," the old man said. The private rooms were all prepared for the major powers, but now that the old man had taken a fancy to Lin Yu's alchemy grade and potential, giving him a private room was the same as throwing out an olive branch. However, Lin Yu did not reveal any emotions. After experiencing so many things, his state of mind was no longer something that could be affected by such simple matters. The old man was a little surprised by Lin Yu's state of mind, but he didn't say anything. After Lin Yu finished, He turned around and left. Now, all they had to do was wait for the auction to begin in 3 days. He was quite interested in the last few items, especially the legendary ancient scroll that contained the records of Forbidden Grounds. It was something he was determined to get his hands on. After arriving at the Tomorrow Night Pavilion, Lin Yu went to the Pavilion Master's room. He knew that it would be difficult for him to obtain what he needed if he only relied on what he obtained from the auction. Sit. Although the Pavilion Master couldn't deduce what Lin Yu was thinking, he could guess what Lin Yu was thinking when he saw him. However, he didn't say it out loud. Lin Yu went straight to the point and said, "Pavilion Master, I came to find you this time to borrow some origin stones." Origin stones were the hard currency of this world. They were also the currency of the cultivation world. They were divided into 4 grades: high, medium, low, and top grade. The legendary immortal grade was rarely seen in the entire North Star ancient nation. The Pavilion Master didn't refuse and directly asked, "How much do you need?" 100,000, said Lin Yu calmly. This was the value of the ancient scroll that he estimated. There should still be some left. 100,000 wasn't a small number. The function of origin stones wasn't as simple as currency. Origin stones were the condensation of origin chi between heaven and earth. After countless years of extraction, they formed a substance that could allow a cultivator to quickly advance. 100,000 origin stones were enough for a 7th-step cultivator to break through. No problem. The Pavilion Master took out a storage bag and handed it to Lin Yu. The Pavilion Master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion had once been extremely powerful. Although his strength had fallen, his accumulation over the years was still extremely terrifying. 100,000 origin stones might be a terrifying sum to an ordinary 7th-step powerhouse, but it was nothing to the Pavilion Master of the Divine Secret Pavilion. Therefore, he casually gave it to Lin Yu. "Thank you." Lin Yu took the storage bag and thanked him. "Don't forget about the pill," reminded the Pavilion Master. He hadn't forgotten about it. "I'll give it to you tomorrow," said Lin Yu. The Pavilion Master was old, but his heart wasn't old. He was still thinking about the pill. In this world, longevity pills were extremely rare. Moreover, they were severely suppressed by heaven and earth. Even a 9th-step cultivator could only live for 7,000 years. The Pavilion Master was already 5,000 years old. He was definitely one of the oldest cultivators in the North Star ancient nation. He was a living ancient history. "That little girl from Mingyue Nunnery seems to be looking for you. What a pity." The Pavilion Master sighed. His eyes were already filled with envy. Lin Yu nodded slightly. Sure enough, after bidding farewell, a maid from Mingyue Nunnery came to Lin Yu's room and invited Lin Yu to the top floor. Lin Yu didn't know what the Saintess of Mingyue Nunnery meant. However, from the Pavilion Master's words, it didn't seem to be a bad thing. Seeing Lin Yu agree, Xing Xing said. He seemed to be sulking at the side. "Brother Xing, what's wrong?" asked Lin Yu. At this moment, Xing Xing turned his head and explained, "I'm angry that the Saintess of Mingyue Nunnery was so blind that she didn't invite me." After saying that, he turned his head to the side again. He circulated his cultivation technique and ignored Lin Yu. Lin Yu shook his head. At this moment, he looked at Xing Xing with a strange expression. He thought to himself, "Is this Xing Xing a rabbit?" This was because from Xing Xing's tone, it was obvious that he wasn't angry because of this. His tone seemed to be directed at Lin Yu. However, Lin Yu didn't think too much about it. He had already followed the maid and walked through the antique corridor. He stepped onto the last layer of the array formation. Following the ripples of the light curtain, he arrived at the top floor. This was a pavilion. It was like a small island. "All right, the last young master is here." At this moment, a woman in charge walked to the front leisurely. The Saintess of Mingyue Nunnery was still nowhere to be seen. With Lin Yu's arrival, a beautiful figure appeared behind the curtain. The one who spoke was a short-haired woman. She looked very capable, but her skin was smooth. Although she addressed him respectfully as young master, there was a hint of coldness in her eyes. However, there was no doubt that the short-haired woman was also very beautiful. She was dressed in tight clothes, which accentuated her flawless figure. "I'm Yu Linglong. I believe you already know the reason why I invited you here, young masters," the woman said slowly after introducing herself. Those who could come here were all geniuses of their respective regions. Their emotions didn't waver too much because of this. Their states of mind were very calm. They didn't feel complacent because they came here and obtained the qualifications. They didn't lose their manners because of that. Chapter 1437. Miss Yu Linglong, may I know what sort of test this time around is? A handsome man asked with a faint smile as he waved a folding fan in his hand. Music, Yu Linglong explained. Let's see if everyone has comprehended anything. There are a total of 3 rounds of test. Are you all confident? Yu Linglong asked. However, those who were qualified to come here were all outstanding people of their respective regions. Their cultivation and talent were all terrifying. Most of them were already at the 7th step. In the entire North Star ancient nation, those who could reach this realm at this age had a high chance of attaining the Great Tao. Naturally, there is no problem. The man waving the folding fan looked at Yu Linglong and smiled faintly. However, I am not interested in the saintess. I wonder if Miss Yu Linglong will give me some face and give me a chance? Yu Linglong was undoubtedly extremely beautiful. In some aspects, she was even comparable to Lu Rian. Both of them had their own merit. However, some people had some understanding of the legends of Mingyue Nunnery. There were once 3 candidates for the saintess. They all cultivated the legendary divine technique. There was not much difference between the 3. The man waving the folding fan clearly knew of this legend. He guessed that Yu Linglong should be one of them. Let's see if you have the strength, Yu Linglong said coldly. Her strength was already at the late stage 7th step. Perhaps there were not many people present who could be her match. However, Lin Yu sat at the back with flagging interest. Lin Yu could give Yu Linglong and Lu Rian 90 points. However, he was no longer interested in them. His goal was not here. After drinking the tea, he prepared to leave. He thought of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion's Pavilion Master's elixir. He still needed to refine it. Hence, he slowly stood up and said, Taoist Yu Linglong, I still have some matters to attend to. I will take my leave first. He was bidding her farewell. There were a total of 7 people, and they all looked at him. Yu Linglong was no exception. The expression in her eyes changed slightly. This was because no one was not interested in Mingyue Nunnery's test. Yu Linglong could not help but take a few more glances at him. This caused the eyes of the man with the folding fan, who already had designs on Yu Linglong, to turn cold. You want to use such a method to attract attention? Truly foolish, someone mocked from the side. Now, they were extremely disgusted by Lin Yu's actions. It's fine that he came late and delayed our time. Now, he even dares to leave before the examination of the Mingyue Nunnery. Who does he think he is? Someone said again. Obviously, all of this could be said to Yu Linglong and Lu Ru behind the curtain. He wanted to win the favor of the Mingyue Nunnery. I know. Isn't this the person beside the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion in Fu Ho country? During the banquet, he insulted the Heavenly Sword Gates deacon. Someone recognized Lin Yu's identity. He's just a grandstander, someone said disdainfully. Although Lin Yu's strength was shocking enough. However, in their eyes it was still only the 6th step. In this place, he was still unpresentable. They were all quite young, and the weakest among them was already at the 7th step. Lin Yu directly locked onto the few people who spoke in secret and said indifferently, Grandstander? Why don't we have a spar? He said coldly. His divine consciousness had already locked onto the few people who spoke. He continued, Why don't I help the two from the Mingyuan nunnery to test them first? As soon as these words came out, everyone's eyes narrowed. At the same time, some people were already angry. Lin Yu's words were too arrogant. Especially the three people who started to mock and ridicule Lin Yu. At this moment, they directly stood up and said, "Come, let me see what right a six-step ant has to say such presumptuous words." A burly man with bronze skin came directly to Lin Yu's side at this moment. Lin Yu was in front of him. He was only as tall as his shoulder and looked very thin and weak. Pathetic. Lin Yu shook his head and said, "I didn't want to stay here. I was originally giving you a chance. Why do you have to act like a clown and think that you're a genius of a region?" The burly man was not angry at this moment. Instead, he laughed and said, "You? Choose a grave for yourself," the man continued. He already had the intention to kill Lin Yu because of his arrogant words. He looked directly at Lin Yu with a wave of pressure. "As you wish," Lin Yu said indifferently. "After I kill you, how many more will there be? Come at me together. I'm in a hurry." His words were indifferent, but there was no doubt that they had angered everyone present. "Kid, don't be arrogant." At this moment, a man with a sword on his back stood up and pointed his sword at him. Lin Yu crossed his arms in front of his chest. However, he thought that since things had come to this point, perhaps he could use this competition to obtain a large number of dawn stones. These were all outstanding people from the major factions who were in charge of this auction. There must be a lot of dawn stones among the items that the factions had their eyes on. Lin Yu did not like to owe others. These people might have more than 100,000 dawn stones on them. "Qingfeng of the ancient origin sect, I will kill you today," the man with the sword on his back said indifferently. Then, a few more people stepped forward. However, Lin Yu was clearly impatient. He said, "I don't need to know your names. I'm not interested. Do you want to come at me together or one by one?" Lin Yu was still as arrogant as ever. After continuous refinement, the power he had obtained from the forbidden area had already reached the peak of the sixth step. He could use this battle to break through to the seventh step. Someone was so angry that he laughed and said, "I don't know why a six-step ant dares to speak so arrogantly." Lin Yu looked on indifferently. "Let's go. I don't want Bright Moon Nunnery's saintess to see blood." "I'll kill you outside," the man with the sword on his back said. "I wonder if the two of you mind?" The man with the fan still had a faint smile on his face. He was also prepared to attack Lin Yu. However, he asked Yu Linglong. He looked very gentlemanly. However, Yu Linglong was not interested in the man with the fan at all. Now, she was looking at Lin Yu with a little more interest. Lin Yu looked handsome. In front of the burly man, he was not eye-catching at all. However, the aura he gave off was indescribable. People could not help but take a few more glances at him. "No problem," Yu Linglong said. She had always paid attention to cultivation. Otherwise, she would not have reached the late stage of the seventh step. "I hope that the few of you are just competing and that no one dies," Lu Rushi said. After all, these people had come here because of Bright Moon Nunnery, which had caused this conflict. If someone died, it would not be good for Bright Moon Nunnery. "In that case, let's use the things you have on you as the wager," Lin Yu said. This was also one of his goals while doing Bright Moon Nunnery a favor. "Since the saintess has said so, I won't kill you today. I'll just cripple you," the man with the fan said. Lin Yu's arrogant and domineering words had undoubtedly infuriated the geniuses here. They were all geniuses of their respective regions. They had always been surrounded by others. They did not expect to be looked down upon in Fu Ho country. Moreover, this contempt came from someone whose cultivation was one level lower than theirs. This was unbearable for them. Chapter 1438. Everyone, there's no need to waste your breath on him. The two saintesses of the Bright Moon Nunnery are still waiting for us. The man with the folding fan was still smiling. However, There was a hint of cruelty in his smile at this moment. Although the saintesses of the Bright Moon Nunnery had spoken, it was inevitable that they would fail in the competition. Lin Yu's divine senses were sharp and he could clearly sense the killing intent. He calmly looked at the man who was fanning himself with a fan in his hand. The crowd turned into flowing lights and arrived at an empty place. It was a platform. "Let me go first," the burly man said with a sinister expression. 100,000 origin stones for one round, Lin Yu said calmly. The burly man was stunned when he heard that. However, he gritted his teeth and agreed. 100,000 origin stones was not a small amount for him. Some of the origin stones were even used by his family to bid for an item. However, he did not believe that he would lose. As he spoke, he waved his hand and the origin stones beside him piled up into a small mountain. Essence Chi overflowed and turned into rays of light. "Since Brother Boo has already taken out origin stones, what about you? Don't you have any?" The man with the folding fan reminded him sarcastically. Lin Yu did not care. He waved his hand and 100,000 origin stones appeared at the same time. The burly man's eyes turned cold. He wanted to get rid of this brat as soon as possible. Just now, the burly man had arrived in front of Lin Yu first. Therefore, they did not reject him when he made the first move. They had their own pride and would not gang up on him. "This is the stupidest decision you've ever made," Lin Yu said. Above the Bright Moon Hotel, Lu Linglong's bell-like voice rang out. "Linglong, go and take a look." "That's what I was thinking," Yu Linglong said. She turned into a flowing light and arrived at the battlefield. "I will tear your mouth apart," the burly man said. He took the initiative to make the first move. During the banquet they had seen Lin Yu make his move. However, the way they saw it, the Heavenly Sword Sect's attendants had weak cultivation bases, and the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion had suppressed them. That was why Lin Yu had been able to take advantage of the situation. However, there was no one else to interfere. After all, Lin Yu was only a 6-step cultivator. Every realm was a layer of heaven. Moreover, they were all prodigies of their respective domains. In terms of strength, divine abilities, Dharma artifacts, and so on, they would not be too far behind. There wasn't much of a difference. The burly man's bronze skin gradually rippled with golden light. There were runes on his skin. Somewhat similar, Lin Yu thought to himself. As his cultivation base improved in this world, he understood more and more that the laws of this world seemed to be similar to the laws of this universe and the land of origin. It was hard to say who was more profound. The runes on the man's body began to spread, further confirming Lin Yu's thoughts. This world was inextricably linked to the land of origin. Lin Yu had used these body-refining runes to raise his battle constitution to the highest level. However, the runes on the man's body were still of a very low level. They didn't catch Lin Yu's attention. Compared to the runes of all the beasts he'd obtained in the secret place, these runes were far inferior. They were far less profound. Although Lin Yu's battle constitution was no longer what it used to be, he'd still mastered the 3 moves of the ancient divine and the mysterious power of runes. All he needed was a simple demonstration. Blood chi swirled around him, making him look like a god of war. As the runes intertwined, his temperament seemed to change. He became incomparably domineering. He was like a god who'd conquered the heavens. It was a sight to behold. Yu Linglong's expression changed slightly when she arrived. Her cultivation was far superior to everyone else's. She could tell at a glance that Lin Yu's mastery of power was profound. For a moment, she couldn't find the origin of Lin Yu's technique. However, it had something in common with the burly man's runes. Boom! A terrifying sound of collision rang out. The earth on the ground churned and cracked like a spider web, causing the earth to shake and the mountains to shake. If it weren't for the powerful restriction here, it might have affected Royal City. The burly man retreated dozens of feet. His arm was bent in a twisted position. Under this blow, his right arm was broken. This scene caused everyone's heart to palpitate. However, the burly man was very tenacious. He didn't cry out in pain. He recovered with his powerful battle constitution. He allowed the bones in his hand to reassemble. However, Lin Yu clearly didn't want to give him a chance. He charged out of the smoke and dust. The runes were withdrawn and had completely merged with his flesh. What kind of body-refining technique are you practicing? The burly man felt a terrifying pressure. Even the legendary figures of the 8th step in his family hadn't felt this before. This wasn't because of Lin Yu's cultivation, but because the technique he'd used was similar to the body-refining techniques passed down in his family. They both used runes to enhance one's strength. Moreover, Lin Yu's mastery of runes and mastery of them were much better than his own. They weren't even on the same level. Boom! A blazing punch. Lin Yu's speed was unparalleled. The burly man couldn't dodge at all. He could only passively raise his arm to meet the blow. Terrifying ripples. The burly man was sent flying into the mountain. The enormous mountain collapsed with a rumble. The man emerged from within with great difficulty. Half of his body had almost collapsed, and blood was flowing from his mouth and nose. This level of injury could only be healed by a man. Lin Yu stood indifferently in place and asked, "Do you want to continue?" His voice was very calm and carried an aura of disdain for the world. Although he was still domineering, he didn't show the slightest hint of mockery. "I lost." The burly man no longer had any strength to fight. His internal organs had been displaced. If he continued to fight, he might die. At the same time, he also knew that he was definitely not Lin Yu's match. It was too terrifying. He didn't understand how a 6th-step cultivator could possess such terrifying power. Moreover, his mastery of divine abilities had reached the pinnacle. Even the legendary 8th-step cultivators in his family couldn't reach Lin Yu's current level. He had been thoroughly defeated and had no choice but to accept the fact. He left the arena dejectedly. Lin Yu put away the 100,000 origin stones. Then, he looked at the others and said, "Who else?" His words were very light, but to the others, they were incomparably oppressive. After the battle just now, no one looked down on Lin Yu anymore. However, the man with the sword on his back still entered the arena. The burly man was only at the beginning of the 7th step. He was the weakest among them. Although Lin Yu gave them a great shock, it wasn't enough to make them cower. "Prepare the origin stones," Lin Yu said. This was something that he cared about. The man with the sword on his back waved his hand and the origin stones appeared in the arena. With the appearance of the 2 piles of origin stones, the place was filled with multicolored light that dyed half of the sky red. The man was very smart. He knew that Lin Yu's combat body was very powerful, so he avoided the attack. The long sword on his back was unsheathed and circled in the sky. Then, it evolved into a sea of sword chi that attacked Lin Yu. The scene was undoubtedly shocking and terrifying. However, Lin Yu was still very calm. The stone sword had become a supreme weapon that was being nurtured in his sea of consciousness. It was difficult for him to use it with his current strength. As he bent 2 of his fingers, a similarly sharp sword chi appeared in the entire battlefield. There were some patterns on the sword chi, as if it was a real sword. This was the power that Lin Yu had comprehended in the powerhouse's ruins in the Forbidden Area. Combined with Ancestor Lu's sword kinesis technique, it was now displaying its power. Although this technique was still inferior to the power of runes. However, Lin Yu was, after all, an existence that was about to break through to the supreme level. He had completely mastered the various techniques that he had mastered. Even an 8th-step powerhouse who had immersed himself in it for his entire life wouldn't be as proficient as Lin Yu. Chapter 1439. Thousands of sword chi converged into a sea. Lin Yu now saw the appearance of the realm sea. The boundless sword energy directly transformed into a realm sea. Even the people standing in the distance felt their hearts palpitate. Is this still the power of a sixth-step cultivator? Someone said in shock. He didn't have the intention to join the battle. He came here just to observe the battle. When he saw Lin Yu's performance, he was really shocked. At the same time, he was secretly convinced. There was no reason to make enemies. Lin Yu was too powerful. The power he displayed now had exceeded their understanding. Not only was his combat physique unparalleled, but his divine ability was also unprecedented. The sword chi turned into a sea of sword chi. At this time, the long sword of the man with a long sword on his back was completely crushed into powder and scattered on the ground. The realm sea was majestic and supreme. Since ancient times, no one knew its origin nor where its end was. Lin Yu's sword chi seemed to exist forever. Even if the man with a sword on his back had used the forbidden technique of his sect, it was still difficult to reverse the situation. He had already formed a situation where he was bound to lose. The clothes on his body were all torn and there were wounds everywhere. Lin Yu was like a god, cold and emotionless. At this time, he just stood above the sword chi realm sea. The divine ability he displayed and the phantom formed, doesn't it look like the place recorded in the legend? Someone murmured at this time. They were all from big forces and at this time they all frowned. That place was in the unknown place. In the ancient books there were only a few records, but at this time it was remembered by people. Their eyes were filled with suspicion. Lin Yu's divine sense was very sharp. He thought, I didn't expect there to be records of the realm sea in this world. This undoubtedly made Lin Yu more convinced that this world once had a connection with the land of origin. Otherwise, it wouldn't know the existence of the realm sea. Chi, the sword light pierced the arm of the man with a sword on his back. The man was now unable to fight anymore. Lin Yu did not take his life, which could be considered as giving face to Mingyue nunnery. After all, he had learned about how powerful the Mingyue nunnery was from the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion's pavilion master. Furthermore, the inheritance seemed to come from outside the North Star ancient nation. That was an unknown place, shrouded in mystery since ancient times. Everything related to that place, be it power or artifacts, was extremely terrifying. Therefore, Lin Yu did not want to provoke him now. It would be best if he could befriend him. This was also the reason why Lin Yu had agreed to enter the attic. However, he did not expect that the Holy Maiden of the Bright Moon Nunnery would choose her husband in the attic. I lost. The man with the sword on his back said calmly. Against Lin Yu, it was difficult for him to stir up any wave. At this point, he could only admit his failure. Although the loss of 100,000 origin stones was a heartache, to the sword-bearing man's sect, it could affect the auction later on. However, the man with the sword on his back had an extraordinary status, so he wouldn't suffer much. Lin Yu put away the origin stones. Then, he glanced at the people around him and said indifferently, "Still stubborn?" His words were indifferent. In other words, he wanted everyone here to attack together. Otherwise, they wouldn't have the slightest chance. Several people gritted their teeth. Finally, the man with the folding fan in his hand no longer had a smile on his face. His expression was very solemn. Even though he was at the late stage of the seventh step, he didn't have the confidence to face Lin Yu now. This feeling was inexplicable. Let's attack together and suppress him, someone said. The man with the folding fan took the lead and stepped forward. At this moment, someone struggled and also went forward. There were a total of 5 people. Now, a terrifying power erupted, illuminating the world. Some people noticed the fluctuations here and were very shocked. Some powerful cultivators could tell at a glance that this was definitely a 7th step expert in a battle. I wonder who is the existence that is worth so many 7th step cultivators to attack? At this moment, someone was interested and quickly rushed here. There were countless experts who came to the Fu Ho country, and there was no lack of 8th step experts. Among them, there were also the elders of these people. They all noticed the aura of the successors of their factions and frowned slightly. They turned into streaks of light and quickly approached this place. Lin Yu saw the 5 people charging towards him at the same time. The man with the folding fan who attacked first was now at the back. Lin Yu sneered. The man with the folding fan was the one who had said those words to Lin Yu. He realized that Lin Yu's threat was too great. If Lin Yu continued like this, Lin Yu might be the only qualified person left in Mingyue Nunnery. Even if they lost and could live, most of the saintesses of Mingyue Nunnery were married to the most talented and powerful person in the Gaochen ancient country. They also lost the right to compete. Although the man with the folding fan came for Yu Linglong, if he lost, Yu Linglong was also a saintess to be. It was natural for her to look down on him. However, now that he had joined forces, Yu Linglong was already looking down on him. Yu Linglong was hiding in the dark, watching the competition. "Arrogant brat, today, I'll let you know why you can't touch us," someone shouted. Lin Yu stood above the sea of swords without any fear. In the blink of an eye, Azura's shadow appeared behind him and became one of his clones. It directly faced one of the people. "What kind of divine ability is this?" Someone was surprised. The Azura's illusory figure faced him. The man was shocked because he realized that he was being suppressed. This was definitely Lin Yu's divine ability, and not some puppet. A divine ability used by a 6-step cultivator could actually suppress a 7th-step cultivator. This shocked him. However, he could only grit his teeth and endure. 4 fellow cultivators quickly suppressed this person. That person shouted. Among the 5 people, other than the man with the folding fan, there were 2 others who were in the late stage 7th step. They were already 1 realm higher than Lin Yu. Now that the sea of swords was constantly shattering, it could not withstand the pressure from all sides and was showing signs of collapse. This made these people's eyes turn cold. Lin Yu was not invincible. It was impossible for him to go against the flow and kill the immortals. He was fighting a cultivator who was almost 1 realm higher than him alone, but he still showed signs of being unable to hold on. Moreover, these people were all the successors of their factions. They had endless means. Lin Yu took half a step back. So that's all there is to it. The difference in realm is not something that you can match with some tricks, someone said arrogantly. A 6-step cultivator is still just an ant in our eyes, someone said with a smile. As the battle had entered a white-hot stage, someone rushed over. They were shocked when they saw the fluctuations just now. There were several 7th-step powerhouses. They're actually besieging a 6-step cultivator. Someone was dumbfounded. A female cultivator rubbed her eyes in disbelief, unable to believe what she was seeing. That person is the person beside the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion. His name seems to be Lin Yu. He's the one who kicked the deacon of the Heavenly Sword sect to the ground. At this moment, someone recognized Lin Yu. However, what he did not know was that after a few hours of recuperation and taking pills, the deacon of the Heavenly Sword sect had already arrived. When they heard people talking about Lin Yu, they did not forget to mention him. Their faces darkened. Chapter 1440. My family's Qilin son. Several old men walked together. The aura on their bodies was like an eternal furnace burning. They were all introducing their own prodigies, and were invited into the pavilion by the saintess of the Bright Moon Nunnery. They should be in the middle of a competition. They were still discussing which family's Qilin son would be able to win the favor of the saintess of the Bright Moon Nunnery. But when they arrived and saw the scene in front of them, their faces fell instantly. They realized that it wasn't a competition, but their Qilin son was besieging a young man whose cultivation level was lower than theirs. And he didn't seem to be completely suppressed. How shocking was that? Even those legendary figures had to wipe their eyes and couldn't believe what they were seeing. The man with a folding fan also sensed that his family's elders had arrived. At the same time, more and more people had gathered. They were already embarrassed to besiege a cultivator whose cultivation level was lower than theirs. And they hadn't killed him for a long time. "Everyone, there's no need to hide. Don't let others see you as a joke," said the man with a folding fan. Screech, there was a clear screech. The man's folding fan turned into a huge bird that was dozens of feet long. It was surrounded by black flames. "Has the 9 Serenities sect already used their strongest technique?" asked a legendary figure. They didn't intervene. For a sect, this was a very embarrassing thing. They sensed that more and more people had arrived. They didn't want to continue fighting and used their strongest technique. With all their techniques, they had the power to burn mountains and boil seas. The earth had turned into magma and was gathering towards the low-lying areas. "That Lin Yu is in danger," someone said with a sigh. Although they didn't know why these prodigies were besieging Lin Yu, they knew from the situation that Lin Yu wouldn't be able to escape today. The difference in cultivation level is like a chasm. Even if Lin Yu is amazing and can crush the Deacon of the Sky Rapier sect, these prodigies are not on the same level as the successor of a big force, someone commented. The Deacon of the Sky Sword sect, who was in the crowd, had a dark expression on his face. That was until the person who commented felt a chill run down his spine. He turned his head around and immediately shut his mouth, not daring to say another word. Lin Yu calmly looked at the big move that was coming towards him. "Exactly." Lin Yu's lips curled into a smile. "You're about to die, yet you still dare to laugh? Have you been scared silly?" One of the people who attacked spoke coldly. The man with the folding fan had a bad feeling, but he couldn't find the source. Seeing the 5 of them using their strongest techniques, no matter how amazing they were only 6-step cultivators. It was impossible to block such a terrifying attack. However, this was exactly what Lin Yu wanted. Now, he had reached the bottleneck of the peak of the 6th step. It was only a step away, but it required a great deal of strength to break through the shackles. The strongest attack of the 7th step came at just the right time. This was also one of the reasons why Lin Yu wanted everyone to attack together. He wanted to borrow this power to complete his breakthrough. Seeing the attack approaching, Yu shook her head. Yu Linglong also shook her head. She had used all her attacks to block all of Lin Yu's escape routes. "He can't escape this calamity." She sighed softly. Lin Yu was amazing, but he was too arrogant. Yu Linglong originally thought that Lin Yu wasn't such a person, but now, facing 5 7th-step cultivators, it was difficult for him to do anything. Boom! A terrifying wave of energy enveloped the area. Everything was unfathomable. The wave of energy swept out, making the place feel like it was in hell. Even those who were watching from afar could feel the immense pressure. "It's over." The man with the folding fan used his strongest technique. At this moment, his forehead was covered in sweat. A smile reappeared at the corner of his mouth. But soon, the smile came to an abrupt end. At the center of the remaining power, a terrifying devouring power suddenly erupted. In an instant, all the energy and matter in the area were sucked dry. The world turned dark. Lin Yu appeared in the sky. At this moment, he carried an indescribable aura, but there was no doubt that it was extremely powerful. He'd broken through to the 7th step. His body was surrounded by black flames. This was the man with the folding fan's technique, but it was only embers. A folding fan appeared in Lin Yu's hand. As Lin Yu gently squeezed it, it turned into powder. It was a sharp weapon bestowed by the sect. But now, in the hands of Lin Yu, it was easily destroyed. The terror of his battle constitution was beyond people's imagination. When Lin Yu was at the 6th step, the 5 of them couldn't effectively suppress him under the siege. In the end, they had no choice but to use their strongest technique. But now, Lin Yu had dissolved it. And he'd broken through to the 7th step. Facing Lin Yu, the 5 of them couldn't help but gulp. It was obvious that the 5 of them wanted to kill him. Lin Yu's eyes were indifferent. "If we don't get rid of this kid, he'll always be our inner demon." Someone exclaimed and shouted crazily. He took the initiative to attack. After using his strongest technique, he was almost exhausted. But now, everyone was watching. The pavilion master of the heavenly secret pavilion also came, followed by Xing and two boys. They also sensed the fluctuations of the battle here. Xing was shocked. He never thought that Lin Yu's strength was so terrifying. He hasn't used his true strength. Xing was now certain. The five of them were ready to attack again. The legendary figures in the sky frowned slightly. When they saw the pavilion master of the heavenly secret pavilion, they could only sigh helplessly. Even they were very afraid of the pavilion master of the heavenly secret pavilion. They knew that the five of them had no chance of winning now. And they could clearly sense that Lin Yu had the intention to kill. Those who could reach the level of legendary figures in major forces were not stupid. At this moment they all came down and stopped their own prodigies. You are no longer his match. Stop. They sighed. If the pavilion master of the heavenly secret pavilion hadn't come here, they might have killed Lin Yu mercilessly. But now it was impossible. Elder. One of them wanted to explain, but he didn't know what to say. You've made the right decision, Lin Yu said. He didn't want to make a big deal out of it. Your juniors have lost the bet with me. Hand over the origin stones. Lin Yu was still thinking about the origin stones. Are you sure you want the origin stones? One of the legendary figures had a cold expression. We've already given you face by coming here. Do you really think we don't dare to kill you? The elder of the man with the folding fan said slowly. He looked over with a terrifying pressure. The eighth step. Lin Yu sneered. A layer of green light rippled on his body. He also used his divine will to counterattack. Everyone present felt an intense pain in their heads, as if their heads were about to explode. At this moment, the elder of the man with the folding fan let out a muffled groan and staggered back a few steps. He didn't expect Lin Yu's divine will to be so powerful. The elder of the man with the folding fan originally wanted to use his divine will to suppress Lin Yu, but now he was the one who suffered. Facing Lin Yu's divine will, he felt as if he had been hit by a divine mountain. If he hadn't immediately used all of his divine will to suppress the situation, he might not have just taken a few steps back. Your juniors want to kill me. If you want to redeem yourself, take out 200,000 origin stones, Lin Yu said indifferently. The remaining 100,000 is to be used to redeem your juniors. Chapter 1441. In everyone's eyes, Lin Yu's words were extremely arrogant. He was facing an eighth-step expert, an existence that was as rare as a phoenix feather and a Qilin horn in the entire North Star ancient nation. Just one of them could suppress a large sect for thousands of years. However, Lin Yu's eyes did not show the slightest bit of fear. He spoke very naturally. Does Lin Yu want to die? Even if he broke through to the seventh step, does he think he's invincible? Someone at the side was puzzled. In their eyes, Lin Yu's actions were simply courting death. Even if he had the Pavilion Lord behind him, there were still a few major forces. If he offended all of them, even if the Pavilion Lord recovered to his peak, he would not be able to withstand them. Do you know what you're saying? A legendary figure questioned. They were already prepared to attack. In the beginning, they did not want to attack because they were giving face to the Pavilion Lord. They did not want to fall out with him. However, Lin Yu dared to say such words, which infuriated them. They had been invincible for thousands of years and were worshipped by others. Now, someone dared to threaten them in front of their faces. Do you think you can protect these people? Lin Yu said indifferently. His figure disappeared from the spot. Blood spurted out from the arm of the man with the folding fan. Then, his arm was chopped off. The legendary figures were all shocked. When they regained their senses, Lin Yu had already returned to his original spot. World's End near at hand was a superpower that Lin Yu had comprehended himself. Its speed was unparalleled, and it combined the space-time law with the falsifying heaven of the 8 great void tribes. It had already surpassed the scope of ordinary superpowers. Even those who were one realm higher than him and had reached the peak of the entire ancient nation would not be able to match Lin Yu's speed. The man with the folding fan screamed in pain. The immense pain almost drove him crazy. Moreover, this injury was irreversible. His arm would never recover. It would be broken forever. The eyes of the elder of the man with the folding fan narrowed. Everything happened too quickly. By the time he reacted, Lin Yu had already returned to his original spot. This scene was out of everyone's expectations. None of them had expected that Lin Yu would dare to injure a junior in front of these legendary figures. "Don't tell me you think that no one can do anything to you," said a famous person. Their auras had completely sealed off Lin Yu. Poof! Following that was another blood-curdling scream. The man with the folding fan had lost another arm. Even though the legendary beings had sealed this entire space, they could not stop Lin Yu's footstep. It was as if there was no one in the world who could restrain him. After all, Lin Yu had mastered the complete space-time Tao law, even if it was difficult to use now. The effect of an 8th-step cultivator sealing off space was negligible against Lin Yu. The man with the folding fan was about to faint from the pain. He did not understand why he had been targeted twice. "You still have 15 minutes to consider," Lin Yu said indifferently. There was no longer any emotion in his eyes. He was threatening an 8th-step powerhouse. Even Xing could not help but break out in cold sweat. "Lin Yu, isn't he a little too arrogant?" Xing felt his mouth go dry. At this moment, the sky was filled with a terrifying power. It was like a raging ocean. However, Lin Yu was unmoved. The legendary figures also realized that they couldn't do anything to Lin Yu at the moment. The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion nodded slightly and said, as expected of the person prophesied by the Heavenly Secrets. He had no intention of making a move. Instead, he was watching with interest. The elder of the man with the folding fan did not dare to gamble anymore. The scene was extremely oppressive. One could clearly sense the killing intent of an 8th-step powerhouse. 200,000 origin stones. A legendary being directly threw a storage pouch to Lin Yu. "However, I don't know if you'll be alive to spend it later." As he said that, he left with his prodigy. Everyone was shocked. An 8th-step powerhouse had actually compromised and handed the origin stones to Lin Yu. Just how terrifying is Lin Yu? Someone saw a clue from it. If the 8th-step powerhouse was not worried about the safety of his prodigy, he probably would not have taken a step back and compromised. However, this also served to show how terrifying Lin Yu was. Even an 8th-step powerhouse would find it difficult to stop him. He had just entered the 7th step, but he was already invincible. In the end, another person compromised and threw the origin stones into Lin Yu's hands. These legendary beings all felt that Lin Yu had an aura that even they were afraid of. In particular, the power of his divine sense was probably enough to suppress the 5 of them. They did not know where Lin Yu's divine sense came from. In addition, Lin Yu had an unparalleled movement technique. They really could not do anything to Lin Yu. This was the most sullen moment for these great forces. In the end, the elder of the man with the folding fan took out 200,000 origin stones and finally left. Lin Yu nodded in satisfaction. All the commotion dissipated, and Lin Yu landed on the ground. He nodded at Yu Linglong, who had been hiding in the void, and then came to the side of the pavilion master of the secret pavilion. "Let's go back," Lin Yu said. He handed the 200,000 origin stones to the pavilion master of the secret pavilion. This was the interest of the origin stones that he had borrowed. Now, Lin Yu had 1,000,000 origin stones on him. Even a great force would find it difficult to take out such a large amount of origin stones in a short period of time. In the auction 3 days later, Lin Yu would definitely get what he wanted. "You've made so many enemies. I'm afraid," Xing said with a worried expression. However, Lin Yu did not care. To him, these forces were not a problem at all. He said half-jokingly, "Don't tell me that the divine court doesn't want me anymore after provoking these great forces?" He knew that the divine court's strength was probably far beyond his imagination. The divine court's vision is not limited to the small North Star ancient kingdom. The pavilion master of the secret pavilion said, "Even if all the great forces here join forces to suppress the divine court, they won't be afraid at all." The pavilion master of the secret pavilion's words revealed great confidence. Lin Yu remembered that the North Star ancient kingdom was the most powerful country in this region. If the divine court did not care, then the origin of the entire divine court was probably not that simple. They came from a region outside the North Star ancient kingdom. This was the unknown land that the pavilion master of the secret pavilion had mentioned. This undoubtedly gave Lin Yu a deeper understanding of the divine court. The founding emperor of the North Star ancient kingdom was a true 10th step expert. There was no one like him in the past or in the future. His cultivation level was already very high. In the universe, he was already a supreme existence. The inheritance that he left behind was definitely unimaginable. There was no lack of 9th step experts among them. The divine court was not afraid. However, in the face of this, Lin Yu was still very calm. They returned to the Bright Moon Hotel. Now, when people saw Lin Yu, they all retreated. They did not dare to approach him easily. In their hearts, Lin Yu had become a jinx after extorting an 8th step expert. Chapter 1442. Lin Yu did not pay much attention to everyone's gazes. At this moment, he walked slowly into his room with the pavilion master of the Heaven's Secret Pavilion. "Lin Yu, weren't you too reckless just now?" Xing asked. In his opinion, it was simply unbelievable that Lin Yu dared to do this to an 8th step expert. Even though Xing knew that Lin Yu's strength was terrifying and that he had many trump cards, he was still facing an 8th step expert who had been in that realm for a long time. This was no different from courting death. Lin Yu shook his head gently and did not say anything about Xing's doubts. Xing was puzzled. However, he did not say anything in the end. When he first saw Lin Yu, he could not see through him. Now, Lin Yu's performance had deeply shocked him. At this moment, he did not know how many trump cards Lin Yu was hiding to be so fearless. Xing had probably underestimated Lin Yu. The next morning, Lin Yu sat cross-legged on the bed. He had not slept all night and had been consolidating his realm. Lin Yu didn't say much about Xing's unwillingness to sleep with others, so he just let him be. "Go and have your breakfast now," Xing said. The pavilion master of the Heaven's Secret Pavilion had already sent news that they had prepared breakfast. Just as Lin Yu got up, there was a knock on the door outside the room. "Young Master Lin, are you inside?" A melodious voice sounded. "What's the matter?" Lin Yu waved his hand and the door opened. There was a petite woman in front of him. She looked very cute. She was very timid. She was obviously from the Mingyue nunnery, and had grown up to be graceful. "Our saintess has prepared breakfast and invites you to have a chat," the woman said. "Tell your saintess that I appreciate her kindness, but I'm going to eat now," Lin Yu refused directly. The woman revealed a troubled expression. However, after hearing Lin Yu's tactful refusal, he didn't continue to pester him. He directly walked out of the room and said, "Then I won't disturb young Master Lin." Lin Yu sighed softly. However, Xing teased, "The one who invited you is the Holy Maiden of Mingyue Nunnery, a goddess that countless geniuses in the North Star ancient kingdom yearn for. You actually gave up the opportunity to have breakfast with her?" Xing was a little puzzled. Lin Yu only shook his head slightly. He had no interest in this. "Why don't Brother Xing go instead of me?" Lin Yu said. After hearing this, Xing directly refused. "I'm not interested in women," Xing said arrogantly. Lin Yu cautiously took half a step back. Could it be that it was just as he had guessed? Xing had always been a rabbit, an old glass? He saw Lin Yu take half a step back. Xing laughed and said, "Don't be afraid. I'm not interested in men either. I'm only focused on Tao." After hearing Xing's explanation, Lin Yu was slightly relieved. If Xing was really a rabbit, he definitely wouldn't have given up the opportunity to sleep alone yesterday. The two of them walked out of Mingyue Restaurant. Although Mingyue Restaurant provided food, the pavilion master of Heaven's Secret Pavilion didn't want to eat here. They came to the most famous restaurant in the area. There were 2 floors and customers were already coming and going. They could see the waiter greeting them enthusiastically. He was even more enthusiastic than the procuress of a brothel. "Sirs, what would you like to eat? Please come in." After seeing Lin Yu and Xing, the waiter had good eyesight and could tell that Lin Yu and Xing had an extraordinary aura. The people who came here had extraordinary status and cultivation. There were many people like Lin Yu and Xing. However, the waiter could tell that they weren't ordinary people from their auras. This sort of person was either an expert or someone with a noble status. Thus, they would definitely be very generous in their spending. "I already have an appointment," Xing said. "I see. Sirs, please come in." The waiter greeted them enthusiastically. Xing and Lin Yu entered the restaurant. Obviously, the disturbance from yesterday was not over yet. When Lin Yu arrived, everyone was shocked. I didn't expect that Lin Yu, who offended several major factions, would still dare to show his face. Someone was shocked. However, they didn't dare to look at Lin Yu. Lin Yu was in the limelight. If they accidentally offended him, they would have to drink Meng Po's soup today. Therefore, the few of them only whispered to each other and gathered around the table to discuss. Although this couldn't escape Lin Yu's perception, he didn't care at all. Yesterday, he didn't care about the lives of the few geniuses. Instead, he cared about the large amount of dawn stones he needed. 100,000 dawn stones were enough for a 7th-step cultivator to advance by 1 level. Now, Lin Yu had no less than 1,000,000 dawn stones on him. Everyone found it unbelievable that he would casually carry such a large amount of dawn stones with him. Lin Yu came to the counter. Xing asked. At this time, the shopkeeper who was calculating the accounts was obviously startled when he saw Lin Yu's face. When he heard that Lin Yu and Xing Jiaoyang were only here to look for the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion, he couldn't help but secretly sigh in relief. "Sir Lin, this way please," the manager said. At this moment, enemies were bound to meet on a narrow road. The Heavenly Sword Sex Deacon also arrived. Just as he was about to take a seat, seeing that the manager had already put down the accounts, the deacon eagerly led Lin Yu to the 2nd floor. They brushed past the Heavenly Sword Sex Deacon. This made some people's gazes become strange. This was definitely the Heavenly Sword Sex Deacon's lifelong shadow. However, the most important thing was, now, he was no longer Lin Yu's opponent. When he was defeated, he thought that he was suppressed by the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion, which was why he couldn't unleash his full strength. However, after witnessing yesterday's battle with his own eyes, he clearly realized that in front of Lin Yu, he was afraid that he could barely withstand a few moves. After seeing Lin Yu come to the 2nd floor, the Heavenly Sword Sex Deacon became dispirited. In the end, his interest waned. He brought Xiaoye and left this place. He could only look for another restaurant. When he left, he could still clearly hear the voices of some people discussing. Almost everyone in the city knew that he had been humiliated. In the end, he had no choice but to return to the Bright Moon restaurant. He decided not to come out of seclusion before the auction started. This also prevented him from encountering Lin Yu again and again, which would make him angry. Lin Yu found the location of the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion. This was the side by the window. He could see the heavy traffic below. There were cultivators riding powerful strange beasts. They looked majestic as they walked on the street with their heads held high. Those who were qualified to come to this city within the city were not weak. They were all cultivators. There were also some experts in the 8th step who brought their juniors here to broaden their horizons. Pavilion Master, you're up so early. Xing cupped his fists respectfully. Weren't I waiting for you? The Pavilion Master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion smiled. After the servant went to report, the dishes were quickly served. Although food is no longer as important to the world after stepping onto the path of cultivation, without it, the world would be missing a taste. The Pavilion Master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion took a bite of the dish, and said with a smile. Lin Yu and Xing sighed. They felt that the Pavilion Master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion made a lot of sense. Gentlemen, this is the pear blossom carving from the shop. Please take a look. Almost all the people who came to this city within the city to do business came from extraordinary backgrounds. The shopkeeper had already recognized the identity of the Pavilion Master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion and Lin Yu. At this moment, in order to please the two of them, he deliberately gave them the most precious wine in the shop. Thank you. The Pavilion Master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion expressed his gratitude. Please enjoy. The shopkeeper left. However, just as they were talking, everyone's gazes were attracted by a graceful figure. She had short hair and looked very capable. Coupled with her black clothes, she had a different kind of beauty. Her figure was exquisite and almost perfect. He came to the front of Lin Yu's table. The person who came was Yu Linglong. Chapter 1443. Why didn't you accept the invitation? Yu Linglong looked at Lin Yu and questioned him. The Pavilion Master of the Heavenly Secret Pavilion smiled faintly and took a sip of tea. He sent a voice transmission to Lin Yu and said, Why didn't you inform me of this in advance? Lin Yu was very calm in the face of two questions. Lu Rushi, the Saintess, is here too? Lin Yu asked. Why are you asking about the Saintess? Yu Linglong asked. Nothing, Lin Yu said. At this moment, Yu Linglong seemed to have noticed him, and the two of them looked at each other. Both of them were expressionless. Then, shouldn't you answer my first question? Yu Linglong continued to question. She had always been swift and decisive. Seeing that Lin Yu was not in a hurry, she couldn't help but feel a little angry and her face was cold. I don't want to be too troublesome, Lin Yu said faintly and evaded the question. Yu Linglong obviously didn't expect Lin Yu to reject her. Many young geniuses dreamed of becoming the saintess of the Mingyue nunnery, but now, someone had directly rejected her many times. In addition, it was also the reason for the competition at the beginning. Are you really going to reject her? Yu Linglong asked in the end. I'm not interested. Naturally, I'll reject her, Lin Yu said and took a sip of wine. Yu Linglong frowned slightly. Ever since she was born, there had never been a young genius who rejected the invitation of the saintess in front of her. However, Lin Yu's attitude was so firm that she couldn't help but have other thoughts. If he was playing hard to get, it would be enough. Lin Yu still rejected her, which meant that he really didn't have that intention. This is the invitation from the Gauchan royal capital. My senior sister will be holding a sage ruler grand meeting. I hope you can attend, Yu Linglong said. As she spoke, she placed a black gilded invitation in front of Lin Yu. No need. Take it back and give it to someone who needs it. Lin Yu returned the invitation. At this moment, the Pavilion Master of the Tianji Pavilion transmitted his voice. Don't be in a hurry to refuse. The Mingyue nunnery has a mysterious background. Even our divine court doesn't know the whole picture. The saintess of the Mingyue nunnery of this generation has a great background. The Pavilion Lord of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion said bitterly. He didn't expect Lin Yu to not be attracted to women at all. I hate the heavens for robbing me of 5,000 years, the Pavilion Master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion muttered to himself. When Lin Yu heard the Pavilion Lord's words, he hesitated for a moment. I'll accept this invitation, Lin Yu said as he placed the invitation in front of him. That's good. Yu Linglong said, however, there's no need for you to be so pleased. The invitations this time have been sent to the strongest geniuses of the North Star ancient nation. The reason I'm giving you one today is merely because I fancy your potential." Her eyes were still filled with pride. Although Lin Yu was qualified, it was still unknown whether he would have the chance to obtain Lu Rushi in the end. This was because the North Star ancient nation had reached its golden age. There were all kinds of geniuses. Although Lin Yu's performance yesterday was surprising, he was still not invincible in the North Star ancient nation. There were still people in his realm who could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. Lin Yu nodded his head. He didn't deny Yu Linglong's words. Yu Linglong felt a little angry. Her words were like a punch landing on cotton. Yu Linglong couldn't see through Lin Yu anymore. The current Lin Yu seemed to have recovered his calmness. Even if the world collapsed, his expression wouldn't change. He didn't seem to be interested in anything. "Sit down and have a drink?" The Pavilion Lord of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion said, "Speaking of which, I have some friendship with the 7th Patriarch of the Mingyue Nunnery." The Pavilion Lord of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion invited. Yu Linglong looked at Lin Yu and finally nodded her head. "All right. Greetings, Senior Pavilion Lord." She didn't deny the Pavilion Lord's words. This proved that it was true. It turned out that this was also the reason why the Pavilion Lord wanted Lin Yu to leave the invitation card. Without the invitation card, even a 9th step expert would find it difficult to enter the Mingyue Nunnery. The Pavilion Lord of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion wanted to use this opportunity to go to the Mingyue Nunnery and meet an old friend. "What's wrong? Am I disturbing young Master Lin's mood by being here?" Yu Linglong asked as she looked at the calm Lin Yu. Yu Linglong had a cold personality. She had always been cold to the men in the world. This was the first time she was treated as an equal. She couldn't help but ask. "No." Lin Yu said, "Here's a toast to Miss Yu." Yu Linglong picked up the wine cup and drank it in one gulp. Yu Linglong remained silent at the side. Although he hadn't revealed his true appearance, it was obvious that he wasn't in a good mood. Among the people present, only Lin Yu and the Pavilion Lord of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion could sense it. Lin Yu's divine thought was powerful. Although Yu Linglong had a very special Dharma treasure with such an aura, he still couldn't escape Lin Yu's detection. After a long time, Yu Linglong and Lin Yu drank a few jugs of wine. Although she was usually cold, there was a sense of heroism in her now. On one hand, Yu Linglong had a neutral beauty. "Although I admire you, your bad temper makes me very unhappy." Yu Linglong held the wine cup in her hand and said directly. "I've learned something." Lin Yu supported himself with one hand on the table and raised his cup. Yu Linglong was speechless for a moment. She picked up the wine cup and drank it in one gulp. 2 to 4 hours passed. Yu Linglong had found Lin Yu and drank a lot of good wine. This city within the city was specially built for cultivators. Therefore, the wine was also made for cultivators. Naturally, the wine was very strong. Ordinary people would sleep for a few months after drinking a few mouthfuls. But now, Lin Yu and the others' tables were full of wine jugs. The waiter was very busy. He was sweating profusely as he kept clearing the empty bottles and serving new wine. The two of them weren't drunk yet. But now, Yu Linglong's face was flushed red. She was completely different from her usual cold appearance. At this moment, she had a feminine charm. Coupled with her short hair and tight clothes, she had a different kind of beauty. "Although I'm not as strong as you, I wonder how good it is to drink." Yu Linglong had a strong competitive spirit. At this moment, it was aroused. She stared at Lin Yu. "I hope you can stand and talk later," Lin Yu said. He now found Yu Linglong interesting. "The pear blossom wine isn't enough. Why don't you drink this? While you're drunk, it can also increase your cultivation," Lin Yu said. He waved his hand. A big wine jug appeared on the table. The clay seal hadn't been opened yet, but one could already smell the rich wine fragrance. This was brought by Lin Yu from the land of origin. When he broke through to the 7th step, his inner world was gradually unsealed, even though it was only a small area. Although it was only a small area, it happened to have this wine. This wine is called drunken immortal wine, Lin Yu said slowly. This was the first time he went to the origin land to find ancestor Lu. Tomorrow revered Ming took out his collection. It was brewed with an otherworldly divine item. Even a Peak Dao realm expert would get drunk after drinking too much of it. Now Lin Yu took it out. He also felt that the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion seemed to have some hidden injuries that could be healed. The drunken immortal wine was equivalent to a ninth-step divine item. It was extremely rare in the entire North Star ancient nation. It was almost impossible to see it. No matter what, I'll definitely get you drunk today, Yu Linglong said. She was already in a difficult position. Her strong desire to win made it impossible for her to run away. Lin Yu opened the clay seal. Immediately, the entire restaurant was filled with the fragrance of wine. It was so rich that one would feel like they were about to ascend to immortality with just a sniff. Some people with low cultivation were even drunk by the smell. They were in a daze and were greatly affected by the wine. This is an otherworldly divine item. After all, the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion was a ninth-step expert. He could tell at a glance that the item Lin Yu took out was definitely not simple. The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion smiled. He waved his sleeve and sealed all the wine fragrance in the restaurant. Only then did it not cause a bigger commotion. Otherwise, who knew how many people would be alarmed just by drinking a jar of wine? Chapter 1444. Pavilion Master. Lin Yu poured out the wine and handed it to the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion. The pavilion master also knew Lin Yu's intentions. He smiled and said, "I've never drunk such precious wine in my life. I'm blessed to enjoy it today." The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion appeared very calm. Yu Linglong, on the other hand, was shocked by Lin Yu's generosity. She had never seen this wine before. She could actually drink it now. "Up to you." Lin Yu spread his hands. It was as if he didn't care about this wine at all. However, when he picked up the wine, he began to reminisce about the past. He thought of Ancestor Lu and wondered if he and the others were still doing well. As he spoke, he spilled the first cup of wine on the ground. "You actually poured away such precious wine?" Yu Linglong held the wine cup and wanted to lick the wine clean. Lin Yu actually poured away a cup so casually. "In memory of an old friend from afar," Lin Yu said. His eyes were now filled with vicissitudes and were incomparably deep. The wine cup in Yu Linglong's hand paused for a moment. She looked at Lin Yu. For the first time, she didn't look cold. For a moment, she was actually a little dazed. "It's rare to drink here." Lin Yu raised his cup. This was the first time he drank wine after coming to this world. "It's fate that we met. Let's drink together," the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion said. The four of them raised their cups and drank it in one gulp. However, after drinking the first cup of wine, they felt their bodies heat up. The drunken immortal wine didn't have the slightest spiciness. On the contrary, it was like nectar that flowed down their throats. However, the aftertaste was endless. It was only after the wine got to their heads that they realized how intoxicating this wine was. Another cup. Yu Linglong saw that Lin Yu didn't seem to feel anything after drinking the first cup. She couldn't help but feel excited. Although she was drunk now, she still didn't want to be outdone. Lin Yu filled the cups for each of them. Yu Linglong clinked her cup with Lin Yu's and drank it in one gulp. He drank 3 cups in a row. Even the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion felt that he could barely bear it. He didn't dare to drink anymore. Yu Linglong's blush had already reached her neck. Her eyes were blurred, but she still refused to admit defeat. Lin Yu felt a little drunk after drinking 4 cups. However, it was not to the point where he lost his composure. It was just that his mind was filled with thoughts. "I can still drink," Yu Linglong murmured, Do you admit defeat?" With that, she collapsed onto the table. When the people here saw them drinking, they were all shocked. Just now, when they took a whiff of the wine, they felt that they were still not fully awake. Before long, Lin Yu had already drunk 4 cups. "You can't drink any more?" Lin Yu asked. Yu Xing, the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion, could sense that he was about to make a breakthrough in his cultivation base. He needed a place to cultivate in seclusion, so he bid farewell and left. He needed to digest the immortal wine in his body. Otherwise, it would be too wasteful. "Who said so?" Yu Linglong got up and wrapped her arms around Lin Yu's neck. Lin Yu was also a little drunk now. He poured another 2 cups of wine. He had a myriad of thoughts. He didn't know how his old friends were doing. He hadn't fully recovered his strength yet, although he had only been in this world for a few years. However, he vaguely felt that the Tao of time in this world seemed to be somewhat different. In other words, the flow of time in this world after the reincarnation road was different from that of the land of origin or the universe. He was worried. What if one day in this world was hundreds or thousands of years in the land of origin or the universe? He was afraid that by that time, the final black calamity would have already arrived. "What's wrong? Holding the cup, you can't drink any more?" Yu Linglong asked. Lin Yu came back to his senses. He looked at the cup in his hand that hadn't been empty for a long time and drank it in one gulp. "I just remembered some past events," Lin Yu said. "Just drink. How can you be distracted?" Yu Linglong said. "Fill it up." "You're right," Lin Yu said. He filled the cups for the 2 of them again. They drank 5 cups in a row. At this moment, Yu Linglong had already sat on a stool with Lin Yu. She clung to him. The unique fragrance of the wine and Yu Linglong's body lingered at the tip of Lin Yu's nose. "You're very weak," Yu Linglong said stubbornly in Lin Yu's ear. "I'm very weak," Lin Yu said. This touched his train of thought. Yes, after all, he was weak, which led to his death. After an unknown period of time, he sacrificed the origin fire beside him to revive his true spirit bit by bit. If he was strong, why would he be like this? Lin Yu sat alone for a long time. At noon, he brought Yu Linglong, who hadn't woken up, to the Bright Moon Hotel. Seeing Lin Yu bring Yu Linglong, some young geniuses were envious and jealous. However, Lin Yu didn't feel anything about it. After handing Yu Linglong over to a maidservant, he went to his room by himself. The Bright Moon Hotel was specially built for cultivators. Therefore, every room was supported by a special array formation that could avoid external interference and allow one to focus on cultivation. Lin Yu came to the room. He didn't know where it had risen to. Lin Yu drew out a wisp of the aura of the clay pot and sat cross-legged on the bed. With his eyes closed, the cultivation base in his body was circulating rapidly. At this moment, his cultivation base in the land of origin also appeared. The cultivation base of the ancestor realm and the power of the 7th step appeared in Lin Yu's body at the same time. However, he wasn't in a hurry to forcefully fuse the 2 forces together. If he wanted to reach a higher level, he had to perfect every realm in his body. Only then could he take the ultimate step. He wanted to completely fuse the 2 Tao fruits of this world into one and step into the realm of cutting Tao. A day passed. Lin Yu slowly opened his eyes. His black and white eyes returned to normal in an instant. His expression was extremely calm. Now, he had determined the ultimate goal of cultivating in this world. Not only did he want to fully recover his cultivation base and strength, but he also wanted to take a higher step. Now, his divine will was almost completely at the 9th step. He didn't sense the aura of the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion and Sheng. Lin Yu walked out of the Bright Moon Pavilion. He went directly to the small town outside the royal city. Now that he was cultivating the scripture of Tao induction, he should have a great background. He needed to find Crow to verify it. According to Sheng, Crow had lived for a long time, much older than the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion, so he should know a lot of things. He came to the well in the small town. That crow was resting on a real withered old tree. Crow. Lin Yu looked at the crow on the branch. Crow opened his eyes and shouted, "Are you a human or a ghost?" When he saw Lin Yu, he was shocked. Although Crow already knew that Lin Yu wasn't the person in his memory, he was still shocked when he saw Lin Yu. "I'm Lin Yu said. Crow's reaction was very big. After hearing Lin Yu's words, he immediately calmed down, and his feathers returned to normal. "I was reminiscing about the past and lost my composure," Crow explained. Lin Yu knew that Crow's nature was like this. To put it simply, he cared about his face. He didn't expose him. "I need to confirm something with you." Lin Yu went straight to the point. Chapter 1445. My name is not Crow. My name is Lu Yu, Crow said. Why are you looking for me? After saying that, he couldn't help but look at Lin Yu. The origin of the Tao induction scripture, Lin Yu said directly. Crow fell into silence. After a long time, he slowly said, "The Tao induction scripture is inextricably linked to the divine court." Lu Yu said, "I just don't know why you brought this up." Crow looked at Lin Yu and asked with a questioning tone, "Can the Tao induction scripture help people reach the 10th step?" Lin Yu continued to ask. "The 10th step? The Tao induction scripture came from the first divine master of the divine court. Do you think it can reach the 10th step?" Lu Yu laughed. Lin Yu nodded after hearing Lu Yu's affirmation. During yesterday's cultivation, he seemed to have felt that there was a flaw in the Tao induction scripture. However, with his current cultivation level, it was difficult for him to discover it. Now, he wanted to get confirmation from Lu Yu. "Why? Are you cultivating the Tao induction scripture?" Lu Yu's eyes lit up as he asked slowly. Lin Yu nodded and said, "But I found that there seems to be a flaw in the Tao induction scripture." "Let me see the scripture you have mastered," Lu Yu said. He frowned slightly. Obviously, he attached great importance to Lin Yu's question. This was because the Tao induction scripture had been passed down from ancient times. If there was a flaw in it, there would be a huge problem. The first divine master of the divine court was very interested in the Tao induction scripture. There was a legend that it was created by the first divine master. However, only Lu Yu knew that this was not the case. Lin Yu recited the scripture he had obtained to Lu Yu in its entirety. After an unknown period of time, a golden light gradually appeared on Lu Yu's body. Lin Yu now knew that Lu Yu had definitely cultivated the Tao induction scripture before. Therefore, after Lin Yu repeated the scripture, Lu Yu's power was activated and a vision appeared. Lin Yu was not surprised that Lu Yu had also mastered the Tao induction scripture. After all, it had already said that the Lord of the Divine Court had obtained the scripture of Tao induction. Judging from Lu Yu's tone, he seemed to have a close relationship with the master of the Celestial Court. Lu Yu was deducing the scripture of Tao induction. After a few hours, Lu Yu slowly opened his eyes. The golden light on his body gradually disappeared, and he once again returned to the appearance of an ordinary crow. After pondering for a while, it slowly opened its mouth and said, "This is indeed the complete Tao induction scripture. The great path is incomplete." Lu Yu only said a few words indifferently. Lin Yu's previous realm was close to the Tao severing realm after all. Therefore, he had a deep understanding of the great Tao. The imperfection of the great Tao meant that the scripture of Tao induction was incomplete and flawed. However, this did not affect its effect. At this point, Lin Yu felt slightly relieved. "Thank you." Lin Yu thanked him. "The scripture of Tao induction is in your hands. This is fate." Lu Yu did not know why he suddenly said this at this time. "My path is not here," Lin Yu said. What he meant was that he was not from this world after all. One day, He would return to the place of origin to fight the final black calamity and pacify everything. But your end is this world. Lu Yu did not refute Lin Yu's words. Instead, he continued to extend his words. Lu Yu seemed to have received news from the higher-ups of the divine court. He knew where Lin Yu came from. Therefore, he said these words. Lin Yu looked straight at Lu Yu. He did not know why Lu Yu was so confident. The world was mysterious, especially Lin Yu. In this world, as his cultivation improved, he could more and more perceive the mysteries of this world. Until a long time later. Lin Yu said, although I don't know where you came to this conclusion, since you helped me and formed the karma, one day I may come back. Lin Yu did not continue to speak. I hope so. In the end, you will not despair. Lu Yu sighed. It seemed to have experienced the vicissitudes of life. There was a turbid look in its eyes. However, there was a wisp of wisdom in it. It seemed that it could see everything through the sky. Since there is nothing else, you can leave, Lu Yu said. Now I am about to enter a deep sleep again. Perhaps I will not wake up in a short time. I want to fully awaken the memories of my previous life. After that, he stopped talking to Lin Yu. Lin Yu nodded. Although he did not understand Lu Yu's profound words, he did not continue to think about it. These questions were not for him to think about. The most important thing now was to increase his cultivation in a short time. After confirming that there was no problem with the scripture of Tao induction, he turned back. He had already sensed the aura of ascension in the small town's Taoist temple. It was now time for a metamorphosis. He was still digesting the pure energy in the drunken immortal brew. Although it did not take much time, it was still taboo to disturb him. Therefore, he crossed the tower and returned to the Bright Moon Hotel. His conversation with Lu Yu took half a day's time. When he returned to the Bright Moon Hotel, it was almost sunset. The afterglow of the sun shone on Royal City with a layer of red. Entering the Bright Moon Hotel, the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion had been waiting for a long time. Lin Yu, did you forget something? The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion said with a hint of mischief. After drinking the drunken immortal brew, the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion's injuries had healed a little. His figure was also a little taller. I feel that my old arms and legs can kill a bull with one punch. The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion said, I just lack that pill now. Lin Yu said apologetically. Because of the events of the past few days, he had forgotten about the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion's pill. Now that the pavilion master reminded him, Lin Yu remembered. I'll refine it for you right away. Lin Yu smiled apologetically. After returning to his room, Lin Yu took out several high-grade medicinal herbs. Among them were great tonics for aphrodisiac. Just a single dose would have great effect. These were the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion's treasured collection. Now, they were all given to Lin Yu. Lin Yu looked at these medicinal herbs and could not help but be speechless. The medicinal herbs given by the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion were probably enough to refine a basket of aphrodisiac pills. Moreover, these medicinal herbs were very old and very effective. They would probably have a certain effect on an eighth-step cultivator. After Lin Yu entered a meditative state, a pill furnace appeared in front of him. The array in the room lit up and sealed off the area. It took Lin Yu a few hours to refine more than a dozen of such elixirs, and the rich medicinal properties were released. There were still pill patterns on them, indicating that they were grade 6 pills. A tier 6 medicinal pill to Lin Yu was merely a piece of cake. Obviously, the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion did not just want a few pills. Therefore, Lin Yu spent a few hours to refine more than a dozen pills. However, since they were made by Lin Yu, their medicinal properties were pure and had great effects. Even withered trees could be rejuvenated. After Lin Yu asked the boy to take away the pills, he prepared to settle them on the last day. With the help of the medicinal herbs he had now, he refined a pill called the Heavenly Transformation Pill. It could dissolve one's cultivation base. Lin Yu wanted to use it on himself. He needed to refine some of the power of the expert from the forbidden area in his body to further improve his cultivation. Chapter 1446. Although there was a great risk in doing so, however, at the auction, it was possible that those 8th step cultivators had designs on him. The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion's cultivation had yet to recover. He was at the 7th step and was not a match for those 8th step cultivators. He could only strengthen his own strength. This was not a risk. The Heavenly Transformation Pill was originally used to kill enemies. Lin Yu was using it to strengthen his own cultivation, so he naturally had his own confidence. After all, his alchemy skills had already reached the perfection realm. His understanding of pills was already extremely thorough, so there would not be any problems. The Heavenly Transformation Pill did not have a clear grade, but in Lin Yu's expectation, it would at least reach the 8th grade to dissolve the cultivation power of a 9th step cultivator. This had a very high requirement for the grade of the medicinal herbs. However, during this time, Lin Yu had already obtained a few of the medicinal herbs. Only the 5,000-year-old feather drop grass was still missing. However, it was not difficult to find. He came to a shop in the city. After asking a few times, he got it. Now was the time to refine the pill. He returned to his room. He activated the restrictions of this place. Then, he used the aura of the clay pot in his sea of consciousness and the power of a few ancient characters to reinforce this place. Refining a grade 8 pill would definitely cause a huge commotion. If he was not careful, the entire Bright Moon restaurant and the royal city might be affected. After making all the necessary preparations, Lin Yu began to refine the pill. A few of the main herbs were circling around him. As the fire of the pill furnace rose, Lin Yu was as calm as a well. Just as Lin Yu was refining the pill, Yu Linglong, who had been sleeping for a day, came to Lin Yu's room. She wanted to knock on the door. However, an unparalleled force pushed him away. She was a little surprised. She said, "What is he doing inside?" Even from outside the room, she could sense the blazing aura. A faint flame seemed to be able to burn everything. Even though there was a supreme restriction here, it still made her heart palpitate. "Little girl, don't come any closer," the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion kindly advised when he arrived outside the room. "Lin Yu should be concocting pills inside. He doesn't want to be disturbed," the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion explained. At this moment, his complexion was already rosy, as if he had become much younger. "Is he still an alchemist?" Yu Linglong asked. She didn't know what other identity Lin Yu had that surprised her. She had struggled for a long time and wanted to thank Lin Yu for what he had done for her. Because the drunken immortal brew was simply too precious. Yesterday, Lin Yu actually took it out and made him drink so much. However, she had fainted. Otherwise, a few cups of drunken immortal wine would have been enough to support her breakthrough. After waking up, she felt a little regretful. However, even with that being the case, the benefits she obtained were enormous. In that case, I'll have to trouble Pavilion Lord to inform young Master Lin that I thank him for the immortal wine back then. After the auction ends, I'll personally treat him to a drink. Yu Linglong spoke, her expression was as cold as ever. It was completely different from how he looked after drinking that day. "All right." The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion smiled and stroked his beard. He said, "Your attitude towards Lin Yu seems to be different. Is that so?" Yu Linglong's expression did not change at all. She said, "It's just to express my gratitude." The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion nodded and asked in an inquiring tone, "I wonder if your ancestor is still alive?" This was the question he was most concerned about. Previously, he was just teasing her. Clearly, The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion still cared about the ancestor of the Mingyuan nunnery. The ancestor has been in seclusion for 500 years. However, he should come out after Senior Sister's Sage Ruler Grand Gathering. Yu Linglong spoke truthfully with a trace of respect towards the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion. That's good. The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion relaxed. He said, the restrictions of the Mingyuan nunnery are terrifying. Even with all my means, I can't deduce the current state of your ancestor. I wonder if things have changed when we meet again. I haven't been to the Mingyuan nunnery for thousands of years. He sighed. Yu Linglong only cupped her fists in response to the pavilion master's sigh. At that time, pavilion master can come and observe the ceremony, Yu Linglong invited. Otherwise, why would I let Lin Yu take that invitation? The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion said with a smile. Only now did Yu Linglong know that it was the pavilion master's idea for Lin Yu to accept the invitation. She said, it turns out that Lin Yu still has no intention of participating in the Sage Ruler selection. Who knows? This old man will think of a way. After all, Mingyuan nunnery's background. The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion did not elaborate. The Divine Court organization could not be exposed. Only a few people knew about it. Back then, the Divine Court organization came to the Gauchan ancient nation from an unknown place. It suffered great losses and was besieged by many factions. It had always been a thorn in the side of the major factions. They wanted to uproot it. However, for tens of thousands of years they had not succeeded. Even if some major factions were destroyed, the Divine Court organization still stood. The Mingyuan nunnery had some guesses about the identity of the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion. The pavilion master did not elaborate, so Yu Linglong did not ask. Since Lin Yu is refining pills, it is inconvenient for me to disturb him. I will take my leave first, Yu Linglong said. The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion nodded. After the auction, there will be a great battle. The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion sighed. He had already deduced something. Hence, he thought of looking for Lin Yu now. However, Lin Yu was currently refining pills. Perhaps the battle after the auction would be more tragic than the pavilion master imagined. It seemed to be specifically targeted at Lin Yu. He did not know if he could withstand it. Unfortunately, Lin Yu had always been shrouded in mystery. It seemed that he had already escaped from ancient history. Even if the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion grasped the most profound divination techniques, he could not pry into Lin Yu's secrets. This was related to Lin Yu's fusion of his past life and future life when he comprehended the spacetime Tao law. It was already difficult to find his existence in ancient history. He had already transcended. He had become a variable that was difficult for anyone to deduce. As the sun set in the west, the moon was bright. In the city within the city, the roars of strange beasts could be heard. They were swallowing the essence of the moon. Lin Yu finally finished refining the heaven transformation pills. There were a total of 3 pills. There were 9 pill patterns on them. The moment the pills were completed, Lin Yu disappeared from the room and went to the 9 heavens. He sat cross-legged in the sky. All of a sudden, the bright moon was covered by dark clouds for thousands of miles. Rolling thunder formed in an instant. Why did the weather suddenly change? Someone was puzzled. Looking at the dark clouds, the thunder contained within them was like a dragon, constantly rolling and faintly discernible. Even the powerhouses at the 8th step felt their hearts palpitate. Is someone undergoing a lightning tribulation? Someone was puzzled. The sky is the closest place to the lightning tribulation. Who would be so bold to approach it? Someone retorted. It's a pill tribulation, Lu Rushi, who was in the pavilion, said slowly. Yu Linglong, who was at the side, recalled the words of the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion and could not help but say, Is it Lin Yu? she muttered softly. This level of pill tribulation had already exceeded the limit of what a seventh-step cultivator could withstand. In other words, Lin Yu was refining an eighth-grade pill. After a simple deduction, Yu Linglong was slightly shocked. She did not expect that Lin Yu's alchemist rank would actually be so shocking. Chapter 1447. No one dared to go up to the sky to check on the situation. Tens of thousands of lightning snakes illuminated the universe. It made the entire royal city as bright as day. In the royal city, Hu Ho looked at the scene reflected in the crystal in front of him. It was the scene of Lin Yu transcending the pill tribulation. He couldn't help but sigh and say, "Fortunately, I made such a decision that day. If I provoked such a powerhouse, I'm afraid the entire Fu Ho country." Originally, he was only afraid of the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion that day. However, in the royal city, he had already received news that Lin Yu had fought a few seventh-step cultivators and extorted an eighth-step powerhouse. Then, he looked at the pill he was refining now. His heart couldn't help but be stirred up by stormy waves. Hu Ho now felt that his duel was clear. The pill tribulation lasted for a few hours. Lin Yu finally appeared behind the room. He looked at the pill in his hand that was still warm and surrounded by lightning. Now, he could try to dissolve a portion of the power of the relic powerhouse. He sat cross-legged on the bed without the slightest hesitation. Then, he swallowed a pill. This was a terrifying poison for other cultivators, but for Lin Yu, it was a sacred medicine that could increase his cultivation. As the pill entered his stomach, a black aura immediately appeared on Lin Yu's body. This black aura was corroding his cultivation, but soon, under the circulation of Lin Yu's cultivation technique, it immediately entered his dantian and arrived at the place where the power of the relic powerhouse was stored. The pure power slowly merged into Lin Yu's body. His realm was increasing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Second level, third level. 4 hours later, Lin Yu was already at the 8th level of the 7th step, which was the late stage of the 7th step. This was just the effect of a pill. Most of the power of the relic powerhouse still remained. Lin Yu estimated that it was enough for him to break through to the 8th level. Next, he would have to rely on himself. Therefore, he was determined to get the few items in the auction. The morning sun had already shone through the window and landed in front of Lin Yu. He changed into a set of green clothes that were extremely simple and unadorned. He removed the restrictions here and walked out of the room. Yu Xing, the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion, had been waiting for a long time at the bottom of Bright Moon Hotel. Now, Xing had reached the late stage of the 7th step, and he gave off a powerful aura. He was still wearing a black robe, and it was difficult to see his face clearly. "Lin Yu, you're finally out," Xing said. "Your aura," but when he sensed Lin Yu's aura, he couldn't help but be surprised. Lin Yu's aura hadn't completely settled down after a night of cultivation, so Xing could sense it. He originally thought that his cultivation speed was already unheard of. However, from the day he saw Lin Yu, he realized that there was always someone better than him. When he first met Lin Yu, he was only in the 6th step. Now, he had reached the late stage of the 7th step. Only 1 or 2 months had passed. Such a terrifying cultivation speed probably didn't exist in the entire history of the North Star ancient nation. But now it really appeared in front of Xing. Lin Yu didn't express any confidence in this. He was already a powerhouse who was about to reach the cutting path. Although this world's laws and cultivation realms were different, he had settled down very deeply. Breaking through at this speed was nothing to be proud of. The auction is about to begin. Get ready to go. The pavilion master of the Divine Secrets Pavilion reminded him, there seems to be something extraordinary in this auction. If there's a chance, don't miss it. Xing only smiled in response. In order to gather the medicinal ingredients for the Heaven's Equal Spirit Pill, He had already spent all the origin stones he had. Now, his wallet paled in comparison. He was only going to the auction to broaden his horizons. Lin Yu and the pavilion master of the Divine Secrets Pavilion were very interested in the auction this time. In particular, Lin Yu was determined to get the ancient records of the Forbidden Area. This was related to his return. Even if he had to pay a huge price, he had to get it. As for the rare items, Lin Yu now had 1,000,000 origin stones, which was enough for him to compete. A few days ago, an 8th step legendary figure had taken out 200,000 origin stones in order to redeem the life of his family's prodigy. He must have suffered a great loss. However, there were still some factions who hadn't made a move yet. They were still strong competitors. Don't act recklessly at the auction. The background of this auction is very powerful. Even the Divine Court won't be able to save you in a short time, the Pavilion Master of the Divine Secrets Pavilion warned Xing. The Pavilion Master of the Divine Secrets Pavilion wasn't worried about Lin Yu. After the past few days, he already knew that Lin Yu had a calm personality. He wouldn't do anything if he wasn't confident. They arrived at the auction venue. Lin Yu took out his token. Immediately, a maid led Lin Yu and the Pavilion Master of the Divine Secrets Pavilion to a private room. Soon, a maid served tea and fruit. The tea here was extremely effective in comprehending the Tao. Even the fruits and melons were rare spiritual items. It was enough to show how generous this auction was. After they took their seats, they waited for a while. They were the last to arrive. Everyone, welcome to the Spiritual Jade Auction. A graceful woman went up on the stage. She wore a red dress with a silk satin draped over her shoulders. She had phoenix eyes and an oval face. Her features were exquisite. She attracted everyone's attention as soon as she appeared. She seemed to have the aura of a fairy. It was an indescribable beauty. Perhaps only Yu Linglong's beauty could compare to her in the entire auction. After the auction venue fell silent, the woman spoke again. I'm Xiao Shi, the person in charge of this auction. Welcome the talents from the various regions of the North Star Ancient Nation. I represent the Spiritual Jade Auction to welcome everyone. Xiao Shi bowed slightly. This made some of the young people who came to broaden their horizons stare at her. It was only when their elders angrily reminded them that they reluctantly looked away. There are a total of 20 items in this auction. Including the 10 that were added at the last minute, there are a total of 30 items. They have all been carefully selected by the Spiritual Jade Auction. There is absolutely no misgivings about their value. Xiao Shi's words had a kind of charm that could make everyone focus on her. I believe everyone came prepared this time. I don't want to waste my breath here. Let's go straight to the first item. After Xiao Shi got everyone's attention, she announced the start of the auction. Lin Yu and the others sat in a private room on the second floor. They could clearly see the items below. The first item to be auctioned was an artifact that could reach the 7th step. However, it was not very useful to Lin Yu and the others. Thus, they did not compete. The people who came here this time are mainly competing for the last few items. Those are what the major factions care about, the Pavilion Master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion said. There were not many people competing for this item. Most of them were loose cultivators and disciples of sections. The final price was set at 8,000 origin stones. The second item was a yellowed ancient scroll. It was an incomplete cultivation technique created by a 9th step expert. This time, there were clearly many more people competing for it. Xing's eyes could not help but burn. The cultivation technique he cultivated was very mysterious and required a lot of cultivation technique. A 9th step expert's creation was very useful to him. You want it? Lin Yu could see Xing's emotions. But Lin Yu took out 20,000 origin stones and directly placed them in Xing's hands. This cultivation technique was incomplete. Although some people wanted to buy it and comprehend it, it was not very valuable. Lin Yu generously took out 20,000 origin stones. Xing was first stunned, then a grateful expression appeared on his face. 9,000. Xing raised his paddle and said. When he saw Lin Yu's location, someone raised his paddle. Someone immediately raised his paddle. 12,000. The value of this incomplete cultivation technique was about the same as a 7th step item. However, it was obvious that someone was targeting the people around Lin Yu. Xing was hesitant. This had already exceeded the value of the incomplete cultivation technique. Continue bidding, Lin Yu said calmly. He knew that someone would deliberately target him today. Since that was the case, he had nothing to be afraid of. 15,000. Xing gritted his teeth and continued bidding. 17,000. Not long after the bid was raised, someone in another direction immediately raised their paddle to signal the price. Chapter 1448. Raise it to 20,000, Lin Yu said calmly. 20,000 was nothing to Lin Yu. I don't think it's necessary, Xing said. Don't worry, he'll raise it again, Lin Yu said. Xing gritted his teeth and continued bidding. However, as soon as he finished speaking, someone continued to raise the price to 22,000. Do you like this cultivation technique? Lin Yu asked. If it's at this price, it's not worth it, Xing said with a frown. The current price had far exceeded the price of the auction. Hence, Xing was already dispirited and had no interest in it. If he had so many dawn stones, it would be enough to buy the other 2 cultivation technique. Then give up. I'll compensate you later, Lin Yu said. Since these people wanted to raise the price, he would make them bleed. 22,000 going once, 22,000 going twice, 22,000 going once. Sold. Qiao Shi smiled and congratulated the person who had won the cultivation technique. The auction continued. The person who had won the cultivation technique had a cold look in his eyes. Lin Yu was not in a hurry. When the next item appeared, Lin Yu continued bidding. Since someone wanted to target him, Lin Yu did not mind playing with them. In the end, when the price was raised to 30,000, Lin Yu stopped bidding. In the end, it was won by another person. These were the people that the powerhouses in the 8th step could find to target Lin Yu in the future. However, Lin Yu did not panic. At this moment, they realized that they had underestimated Lin Yu. He seemed to be uninterested in these things and already knew that someone was deliberately targeting him. Hence, he deliberately raised the price. Next time, act according to the situation. Don't be rash, one of the powerhouses in the 8th step said slowly. When it came to the 4th item, Lin Yu still raised the price. However, in the end, someone hesitated. When an itinerant cultivator raised the price, Lin Yu did not continue. The 6th item, Lin Yu continued. But this time, when someone was hesitating, Lin Yu directly raised the price to 40,000. He seems to be determined to obtain this item. An 8th step cultivator noticed something was wrong and directly ordered people to continue bidding. But when someone raised the price to 45,000, Lin Yu didn't say anything. The price of these items had far exceeded their original value. However, the 8th step powerhouse could only grit his teeth and swallow his anger. These were the rules of the auction. Naturally, they couldn't break them. If they went back on their word and didn't hand over the origin stones in the end, then the auction house would be in trouble. There was once a great power that was the best example. After the spiritual jade auction, the sect was directly destroyed by the expert. In the end, the entire sect declined. Therefore, while the spirit jade auction was a guarantee of quality, no one dared to offend it. Now, they didn't know how much they had lost. That brat is extremely shrewd. You must be careful. They all became serious. Although tens of thousands of origin stones weren't much to them, if this continued, they might lose out in the fight for the last few items. They were all aware of this fact. Are you scared? Lin Yu frowned as he looked at the people who had been bidding earlier in the field. Lin Yu had a faint smile on his face. He didn't seem to care about these things at all. He just found them interesting. Xing now felt that he couldn't see through Lin Yu. Although he had never concealed his aura or anything else in Xing's eyes, it seemed as if he had never truly known Lin Yu. Lin Yu sat on the chair and sipped a few mouthfuls of tea. Next up is the show, Lin Yu said. The next item was Lin Yu's elixirs. This time, the Spirit Jade auction was to auction Lin Yu's elixirs as a package. These elixirs were made by an alchemist. There are 20 Grade 4 elixirs, 10 Grade 5 elixirs, and 2 Grade 7 Sky Spirit elixirs. Next, Qiao Shi introduced the medicinal properties of the elixirs in a very professional manner. Then, she continued, these elixirs all have 9 patterns, which means that they are of the highest quality, including the Sky Spirit elixir. I'm sure I don't need to explain too much about the effects of the Sky Spirit elixir. It can allow one to break through without any bottlenecks. As soon as she said this, some people's eyes lit up. 9 vein heavenly spirit pills. Just these 2 pills alone are priceless. Someone said slowly. At the same time, they were determined to get the Sky Spirit elixir. Some people had already reached the bottleneck of their cultivation level and needed the Sky Spirit elixir to safely break through to the next cultivation level. After seeing the Sky Spirit elixir, the look in Xing's eyes became weird. Turned out that this was the good show that Lin Yu was talking about. This is not the most important thing. A person who can refine a 9-pattern Sky Spirit elixir is at least a Grade 8 alchemist. Our Spirit Jade auction has already obtained the approval of that person. The person who obtains the elixir will have the opportunity to meet him in this city. As for what happens after, Qiao Shi did not say more. Obviously, she had stirred up everyone's emotions, especially some of the big forces. At this moment, their eyes lit up. In their eyes, these elixirs were no longer important. The most important thing was to meet with that alchemist. The alchemist's intention was obvious. He wanted to invite that person to join his sect. The value of this was extremely terrifying. Some of the big forces did not have a Grade 8 alchemist, so every year, they would pay a huge price to exchange elixirs for their 7th or 8th step experts to cultivate. This price was undoubtedly terrifying. 100,000. Someone directly bid. At this moment, after hearing Qiao Shi's words, the itinerant cultivators were obviously speechless. They originally thought that their life savings might be able to exchange for a Sky Spirit elixir that could help them step into a higher realm. But now, looking at the big force's intentions, they obviously had no chance. This was a bidding war between the big forces for the opportunity to meet that cultivator who was suspected to be a Grade 8 alchemist. Some of the weaker forces did not have the opportunity to participate. Even if some of the big forces had one Grade 8 alchemist, no one would complain about having too many of them. If someone had a Grade 8 alchemist, it meant that the foundation of their forces would reach a higher level. No one gave up. Sky Rapier Sect, you already have a Grade 8 alchemist in your sect. Do you still want to fight with us? Someone said. 300,000. Lin Yu said lightly at this moment. He did not mind watching the show. At this moment, he slowly opened his mouth. Some people fell into hesitation. After all, the purpose of their trip was to obtain a few items after the auction. But now that a Grade 8 alchemist was right in front of them, they did not know how to choose. Our Su family originally had a big competition, but it was because we lacked an alchemist that led to a gradual decline in the later generations. This time, no matter what, we must invite this Grade 8 alchemist into our Su family. At this moment, the elder of the man who was waving the folding fan looked determined. He had already made up his mind. No matter what, he had to invite this alchemist into the Su family, regardless of the cost. When he saw that Lin Yu had also started to compete, a raging flame burned in his heart. 400,000. The Su family's patriarch said slowly at this moment. However, His words were filled with excitement. Chapter 1449. 450,000. Lin Yu continued to raise the price. Are you trying to sell your melons? Xing said with a smile. He could tell from the heavenly spirit pill that this was a pill refined by Lin Yu. But now, he was raising the price himself. Qiao Shi obviously knew that this pill had come from Lin Yu. She looked at Lin Yu with a smile. However, everything was done in secret. No one else noticed that Qiao Shi was looking at Lin Yu. Such a young grade 8 alchemist. Qiao Shi sighed to herself. Lin Yu was the one who asked her to deliver the rest of her message. They hadn't expected it to be so powerful. It made some of the big factions go crazy. Even a few of the big factions made a huge decision to give up the competition for the last few items in order to rope Lin Yu into their own factions. However, Qiao Shi quickly realized that even the Spirit Jade auction house couldn't help but try to rope in such a young alchemist, let alone other people. The Su family patriarch gritted his teeth. He was now certain that Lin Yu might have some ideas about this alchemist. That was why he was competing at all costs. He knew that Lin Yu had at least 1,000,000 origin stones on him. Even though he was crazy, he was still calmly analyzing the situation. After all, he had lived for thousands of years. Even his eyebrows were empty. The Su clan patriarch said in a low voice, "There was no news about this pill before. Lin Yu must have blackmailed us mainly for the next few items. If that's the case, he probably wouldn't have spent so much on this alchemist." However, he immediately frowned. This alchemist couldn't be lost. If Lin Yu really raised the price to 1,000,000 origin stones, what should he do? He had only brought 5,000,000 origin stones to the Su family. Initially, Lin Yu had extorted 200,000 origin stones. Now, he only had a few. Although he knew that if he paid the full price, he could naturally get what he wanted, which also meant that the Su family had completely lost the qualifications to compete. "We can't care about anything else," the Su family's ancestor said. 500,000. 550,000. After the Su clan's patriarch raised the price, it was clear that more than one power was interested in the pill refiners. Therefore, before Lin Yu could speak, someone else had already spoken. "It's almost done. It seems like I don't need to add any more details," Lin Yu said with a smile. Even he himself did not expect that a mere piece of news would make these forces so crazy. Lin Yu felt that it was about time. Therefore, he didn't say anything and just sat on the mountain to watch the tigers fight. 600,000. The Su family's ancestor continued. After waiting for a while, someone else made another bid. When he saw Lin Yu, he was certain. Lin Yu did not have much interest in this alchemist. "Although I have used up everyone's origin stones here, and that kid will be able to obtain the items at the back." A cruel glint gradually appeared in his eyes. "The items after the auction also belong to me. You're just making a wedding dress," the Su family's ancestor continued. The Su family's ancestor had already joined forces with a few other 8th-step powerhouses and was ready to kill Lin Yu after the auction. During the previous incident, Lin Yu had severely slapped their faces. This matter concerned their power. It was impossible for them to ignore it. This was what Lin Yu had thought, so he had already made preparations. At that moment, the price of the pill had already reached 600,000. Some people's foreheads were already covered in cold sweat. 700,000. The Su family's ancestor gritted his teeth and said. His eyes were already bloodshot. He was determined to get the opportunity to see the alchemist for the pill refiners. Even a few 8th-step powerhouses were about to shed all pretenses of cordiality at that moment. Su family's ancestor, aren't you going overboard by doing this? Someone who was with him asked at that moment. This is an alchemist. It has always been obtained by people with strength. There is no such thing as going overboard, the Su family's ancestor said. He had already bid 700,000, which had already exceeded his expectations. However, this also meant that the Su family valued the alchemist who was hiding in the dark. It could be considered an alternative investment. 750,000. Someone continued. Well said. Let's put aside other matters for now. Some large factions, which did not have any eighth-step alchemists, immediately spoke up. They were all factions that had been blackmailed by Lin Yu before. At that moment, they were about to shed all pretenses of cordiality. Lin Yu couldn't help but smile as he said, I didn't expect that the auction of this pill would have such an effect. This was something that he hadn't expected. If this continued, there might be estrangement between these people, which would lead to mistakes in their subsequent attacks on him. Lin Yu was confident that he would be able to escape when faced with a few eighth-step cultivators besieging him at the same time. However, he was not satisfied with this. He wanted to counterattack and make a name for himself. Even if he provoked a few large factions, Lin Yu would not hesitate. He needed to obtain more resources to support his next advancement. As the price continued to increase, in the end, the Su family's ancestors staked everything on a single throw and directly bid a high price of 1 million. You are digging your own grave. Don't you want the last few artifacts? The person who had been competing with the Su family's ancestors said with a frown. This was a reminder, as well as a last hope for the Su family's ancestor to give up. However, there was no reason to retreat now that they had come this far. I have never regretted anything. The Su family's ancestor appeared to be very indifferent. Xing's interest was piqued as he said, I wonder what he will think when he sees that the alchemist is you. Xing could not help but laugh when he thought of this. All right, you can do it, the person continued with a look of anger in his eyes. At the same time, some people shook their heads helplessly. The price of 1 million had already made some people shrink back. After all, 1 million this time was not ordinary. If someone forcibly increased the price, they might walk out of the auction. However, they would not be able to withstand the wrath of a large faction. Before increasing the price, they would have to consider whether they could withstand the Su family's wrath. Lin Yu smiled. He had already seen the Su family's ancestors' determination. Add more fuel to the fire, Lin Yu said nonchalantly. 1.05 million, Lin Yu said. The focus of the auction was on Lin Yu. Someone actually dares to increase the price at a time like this, someone exclaimed in surprise. However, when he saw Lin Yu, he fell silent. You are courting death, kid. The Su family's ancestors' eyes were filled with killing intent. This is a spirit jade auction. Qiao Shi reminded him. In an auction, one could not use words as a threat. The Su family's ancestor had clearly violated the taboo. Although he was extremely angry, he still knew the background of the spirit jade auction. After staring at Lin Yu for a long time, he sat back down in his seat and said, 1 million. Hiss, everyone present sucked in a breath of cold air. The value of this pill was simply too terrifying. However, they all knew that the Su family's ancestor was not interested in the pill, but the alchemist behind it. At this point, he had already thrown everything aside just to obtain that alchemist. You win, Lin Yu said. The Su family's ancestor almost spat out a mouthful of old blood. How could he not know that Lin Yu was deliberately arguing with him? However, things had already come to this point and there was no other way. He could only sit in his seat dejectedly. However, now that he had obtained the Grade 8 alchemist, it meant that he had not lost out. Chapter 1450. When Lin Yu saw the expression of the Su family's patriarch, he revealed a playful smile. Now, there was one less competitor for the last few items. Then, a few more items were auctioned off. Lin Yu also took a fancy to a 10,000-year-old sword heartgrass, but now, no one deliberately targeted him. It was nearing the end, and everyone's target was on the last few items. In fact, these items were already decided by the few big forces. Long before the auction, they had already discussed this matter. Although this was explicitly forbidden for the spiritual jade auction. However, even they knew that the last few items were very precious. This trend was inevitable. Therefore, they did not care much. Patriarch. At this moment, a genius of the Sioux family was worried. Shut up. The Sioux family's patriarch scolded. That person immediately shut up. The Sioux family's patriarch was in a very bad mood. If Lin Yu did not bid for one of the items, he would have let down the entire Sioux family. Only by bringing back an 8th-grade alchemist could he barely make up for it. In the end, Lin Yu bought the herb for 80,000. I believe everyone has heard of the last few items, so I won't say much. The first item is an ancient book about the forbidden land of the great wilderness. It's the only one in the world, and it might be able to unlock the veil. Qiaoshi said, "Everyone, don't worry. Since it's for the auction, the spiritual jade auction will definitely not read the contents in advance." As an ancient wooden box was brought up, everyone's gazes were firmly fixed on it. This was an ancient book that recorded the mysterious forbidden land outside the Gaochen ancient country. No one knew how long it had been. This is suspected to be left behind by a 10th step expert. Everyone, don't worry. It's definitely not fake, Qiaoshi said. At this moment, some people fell into hesitation. The ancient book that recorded the forbidden land. According to Qiaoshi's introduction, it could only unlock the veil of the forbidden land. Although the forbidden land of the great wilderness recorded the secrets that could make people curious. However, no one dared to take the risk. Even a 10th step expert could not live forever. Even if he recorded the forbidden land of the great wilderness, he still could not survive until now. This was enough to explain everything. However, the forbidden land of the great wilderness was very important. To the major powers, it had an unimaginable value. At this moment, someone from the Heavenly Sword sect said, 200,000. There was a legend that the Heavenly Sword sect had an expert of the 9th step who was about to pass away. The forbidden grounds of the Great Desolation recorded the secrets of immortality. To them, it was something they had to obtain. 300,000. Someone continued to bid. Until now. Even if some of the major forces had already decided internally, they would still be able to do so. However, there were still some people who had come prepared. They couldn't care less anymore. They were also interested in the forbidden grounds of the Great Desolation. 400,000. The people from the Sky Sword sect continued to speak. The deacon of the Sky Sword sect sat quietly at the side. Evidently, the old man who spoke had a much higher status than him. The Heavenly Sword sect was determined to obtain this ancient book. Hence, they did not hesitate and directly spoke. 1 million. Lin Yu said calmly. This was also the item he cared about the most. Hiss, 1 million. Is Lin Yu crazy? Someone was extremely shocked. Even Sheng, who was at the side, was shocked by Lin Yu. Are you crazy? 1 million? This is an origin stone, not a stone. Sheng reminded. Lin Yu did not speak. Only the pavilion master of the Sky Secret Pavilion nodded slightly. He seemed to already know about Lin Yu's background. Hence, he was not surprised that Lin Yu had offered such a high price. The old man from the Sky Sword sect was obviously stunned. He had not expected that someone would be even more domineering than the Sky Sword sect and directly raise the price to 1 million. This put him in a difficult position. The Sky Sword sect's patriarch had spent countless natural treasures to prolong his life. Currently, the Sky Sword sect did not have many origin stones. They had only brought 2 million origin stones. However, judging from Lin Yu's appearance, it was obvious that he was determined to obtain this item. 1 million, the old man from the Sky Sword sect said again. 2 million, Lin Yu continued. After reaching 1 million, This place had become the battlefield between Lin Yu and the Sky Sword sect. No one else participated. They were just constantly exclaiming at the side. This year's auction was truly too terrifying. There were easily 1,000,000 origin stones. Some cultivators and even some mid-tier factions could only shrink back and did not dare to participate. Perhaps some factions have already sensed that the world is about to change, someone said with a sigh. In previous auctions there had never been so many divine items. In the previous auctions, ancient books about forbidden lands like these had always been the highlight of the auction. Now they were taken out before the first few items. The old man from the Sky Sword sect gritted his teeth, but there was nothing he could do now. The origin stones that the Sky Sword sect had brought were not enough. Young friend. He had wanted to plead with Lin Yu to let him have the ancient book. However, Qiao Shi stopped him. Even though the Sky Sword sect was powerful, they had to abide by the rules. However, Qiao Shi did not expect Lin Yu to be interested in this item. She had thought that Lin Yu would bid for cultivation techniques and mystical abilities. However, Lin Yu's actions were clearly beyond her expectations. She muttered to herself, "I didn't expect him to extort origin stones from major factions for this item." Qiao Shi was very smart and had vaguely guessed something. Coupled with the foundation of the Spirit Jade auction, when Lin Yu fought with several seventh-step prodigies, and his identity as an alchemist, she had already found out where Lin Yu came from. Now, Lin Yu's wallet was almost empty. 1,200,000 origin stones was all that he had saved up. However, as long as he could obtain the ancient book, nothing would hurt him. There's still the 1,000,000 origin stones from the Su family's patriarch, Lin Yu muttered to himself. As the second artifact appeared, it also caused a burst of exclamations. This was an incomplete Dharma artifact left behind by a 10th step existence. It still had a terrifying fluctuation that was faintly emitted. It carried a mighty force that looked down on the heavens and earth. There was still soil on it, as if it had been dug out from an unknown place not long ago. The remnant of a 10th step powerhouse was originally a long spear, but it has been damaged in an unknown battle. However, ordinary 9th step Dharma artifacts are no match for it. If it can be repaired one day, Qiao Shi's words stirred up the emotions of countless people. The 10th step was a realm that many people dreamed of. Now, the artifact of such a powerhouse was placed in front of them. There was no one who didn't reveal a shocked expression. They were all extremely fanatical. However, some people knew that this artifact was no longer something they could control. Even if one's faction was second-rate in the North Star Ancient Nation, they would still not be able to protect it. It was very likely that they would be killed. 500,000 origin stones. Someone directly shouted. The competition for the long spear was very intense. Compared to the ancient book that recorded the forbidden area, something that could obviously increase one's strength was more worthy of attention. Chapter 1451. The price quickly rose to 900,000, and there was no sign of it stopping. Now that it was here, because of Lin Yu's participation, any reservation was no longer useful. All the balance had been broken. Especially Lin Yu's 2 moves just now. Now that the Sky Sword sect had also joined in, even if they couldn't get the ancient book, they had to at least take one thing back. This was because their patriarch's current condition was very unstable and he might die at any moment. If they used a 10th step artifact to comprehend the Tao runes within it, they might be able to stabilize themselves. Therefore, the Sky Sword sect was very fond of this artifact. Because they didn't get the ancient book, they also joined in. Sky Sword sect, have you forgotten the agreement? Someone asked. I'm sorry, everyone. There's nothing we can do about it. The old man was very calm. In terms of strength, the Sky Sword sect had never been afraid of anyone. At this moment in the auction, he was not afraid of anyone's threats. 1,000,000. the Sky Sword Sect's old man said directly. In fact, only the Su family's patriarch had brought the most source stones. But now, in order to become a grade 8 alchemist, he was no longer qualified to bid for the last item. Some people gritted their teeth. In the end, the Sky Sword Sect obtained this artifact at the price of 1.2 million source stones. Lin Yu and the others just watched indifferently. Although they were a little envious, they didn't think too much about it when they considered their own strength. After all, anyone would want to obtain a 10th step artifact. The few artifacts were divided. But now, because of Lin Yu's participation, the Sky Sword Sect broke the agreement and the competition for the last few artifacts was especially fierce. "It's the last artifact," someone said. They didn't know what the last item was. This was the rule of the Spirit Jade auction. The last artifact. Qiao Shi deliberately kept them in suspense. But now, there weren't many people who had the ability to compete. The Pavilion Master of the Divine Secrets Pavilion said with a smile, "The last item should be mine," he said slowly. The Pavilion Master of the Divine Secrets Pavilion had already deduced what the last item was. As the silk cloth covering its aura was removed, a tortoise shell the size of a palm appeared. There were 7 pieces in total. A few of them were already damaged. The moment Lin Yu saw the tortoiseshell, he was stunned. A familiar aura assaulted his senses. That was because he no longer cared about the last item, so he didn't deliberately search for it. It was only when the satin was finally lifted that he realized the truth. The symbols recorded on it seemed to be related to the origin ancient characters. Lin Yu was slightly surprised. The origin of the origin ancient character was extremely mysterious. Even the utmost being of the past had only comprehended and grasped it, and did not know of its origin. But now, Lin Yu actually saw a tortoiseshell that was similar to the ancient word origin, and it was in another world. This was shocking to Lin Yu. Could it be that the origin ancient characters still exist in this world? Lin Yu couldn't help but wonder. This item is something that my Spirit Jade auction house had to pay a huge price to bring out from the ruins of an unknown place. It has the blood of a legendary figure of my Spirit Jade auction house on it. Qiao Shi frowned with a hint of sadness. There were dried bloodstains on the tortoiseshell, giving it a menacing look. However, this tortoiseshell seemed to have been touched by someone before. It was just that the Spirit Jade auction house had not participated in it. Therefore, it was brought out as the last item to be auctioned. The starting bid for this item is 1 million. Qiao Shi did not explain further. The fact that it was brought out from the ruins of an unknown place was enough to explain everything. In order to obtain this tortoiseshell, the Spirit Jade auction house had lost more than 1/8 step cultivator. They had paid a huge price. It was just that in the years that followed, no one had managed to comprehend the contents within. The Pavilion Master of the Divine Secrets Pavilion rubbed his palms together. The entire place was silent. Qiao Shi did not hide anything and said that the Spirit Jade auction house had not managed to comprehend the contents within in the past 100 years. Therefore, they were all suspicious of the tortoiseshell. Since there is no one else, this old man will start. 1,100,000. The Pavilion Master of the Hidden Secrets Pavilion stood up and said slowly. Some people were ready to back out. 1,300,000. At this moment, someone stood up and said slowly. The person was dressed in white and had a golden pill furnace embroidered on his shoulder. His face was fair and clean. Since this tortoiseshell was brought out from an unknown place, its medicinal value must be immeasurable, the person said slowly. He looked very young and his eyes were filled with pride. Someone recognized that person. He was also from the imperial capital and was the successor of the Alchemy Society. The Alchemy Society, as the name implied, was full of alchemists. It was said that it was founded by an alchemist who had almost reached the 10th level. Because of alchemy, they did not lack source stones and had countless resources. They had also made friends with many powerhouses. Therefore, he was only interested in this rare medicinal herb. This was also the reason why he did not compete with Lin Yu for the Sky Sword herb. Using it as a medicinal herb is a reckless waste of God's gift. The Pavilion Master of the Hidden Secrets Pavilion cursed in his heart. However, even though he was once a cultivator at the 9th step, he could not take out so many source stones in such a short time. I still have 1,100,000 source stones. Pavilion Master, why don't we bid for this item together? Lin Yu said. If it contained ancient origin characters, its value would be immeasurable. 1 or 2 million source stones could not compare to it. All right. The Pavilion Master nodded. He could also tell that Lin Yu was also interested in this tortoiseshell. However, the Pavilion Master only cared about one of its functions, which was its use for divination. The items in the ruins contained a mysterious power. This would undoubtedly enhance the Pavilion Master's divination skills. 1,500,000. The Pavilion Master of the Hidden Secrets Pavilion said. His eyes were filled with determination. 1,700,000. The young successor of the Alchemy Society said again, Pavilion Master, I'm sorry to offend you. After all, the Pavilion Master of the Hidden Secrets Pavilion was a powerhouse at the 9th step. His reputation had spread throughout the imperial capital for many years. Although the successor of the Alchemy Society was young, he still knew some things. It's fine. Let's see who gets this item in the end. The Pavilion Master of the Hidden Secrets Pavilion was very magnanimous. He did not care much about source stones. Although it was not enough now, with Lin Yu's support, he was confident that he could obtain the tortoiseshell. 2 million. The Pavilion Master of the Hidden Secrets Pavilion said calmly. Everyone was stunned on the spot. How much was 2 million source stones? Even a second-rate sect would not be able to accumulate such an amount in decade. However, the Pavilion Master of the Hidden Secrets Pavilion did not seem to care at all and directly called out a price. Only then did they realize that this was the final item. Its value was definitely terrifying. Otherwise, the Spirit Jade Auction House would not treat it as the final item. It's only a medicinal ingredient. I'm not as good as the Pavilion Master of the Hidden Secrets Pavilion. The successor of the Alchemy Society cupped his hands and announced his withdrawal from the competition. The Pavilion Master of the Hidden Secrets Pavilion thanked him. However, he was still excited when he looked at the tortoiseshell. He had lived for nearly 5,000 years and was indifferent to artifacts and other things. The Pavilion Master of the Hidden Secrets Pavilion had immersed himself in the art of divination for countless years. Now that he could see a divine item in this area, he was naturally moved. All right, the auction is coming to an end. Qiaoshi, thank you all for your support. Qiaoshi bowed. Lin Yu had already sensed more than one murderous intent. The end of the auction represented the beginning of a fierce battle. Lin Yu had no intention of backing down. He looked in the direction of the Su family's patriarch with a smile. Chapter 1452. Are you confident? The Pavilion Master of the Prophecy Pavilion asked slowly. Their items are all mine, Lin Yu replied calmly. Then, they went to the backstage of the Spirit Jade auction unhurriedly and paid the origin stones. The Su family patriarch had already paid the origin stones and had left the Spirit Jade auction to set up an ambush. However, Lin Yu did not mind. Young Master Lin, these are your origin stones, but... The person who received Lin Yu was Qiaoshi. It was obvious how important Lin Yu was to the Spirit Jade auction. Thank you, Lin Yu replied. Then, he handed all the origin stones to the Pavilion Master. I'm not sure if I should say something, Qiaoshi said. Why don't you lie low for a while at the Spirit Jade auction and wait for those people to leave before making any plans? I appreciate your kindness, but there's no need. Lin Yu thanked her. Lin Yu could naturally sense the Spirit Jade Auction's good intentions, but he was not afraid of those eighth-step cultivators. If he lay low for a while at the Spirit Jade Auction, he might lose his divine item. He already regarded the divine items obtained by the other factions as his. If he went out now, he could just take them casually. It seems that young Master Lin is very confident. Xiao Shi smiled sweetly and did not say anything else. However, young Master Lin, if you want to join the Spirit Jade Auction, you are always welcome, Xiao Shi said when she saw Lin Yu turn around. There was a charming look in her eyes. It was obvious that she thought highly of Lin Yu, which was why she had extended an olive branch. Lin Yu nodded and said, "I will consider it." With that, he left with the pavilion master of the Prophecy Pavilion. When they returned to the Bright Moon Hotel, they could clearly sense that someone was following them. It seemed that someone had left some sort of trap on Lin Yu's body before this. He actually did not hide at the Spirit Jade Auction or escape. His courage is commendable, the Su family patriarch said with a cold smile. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Looking at the prodigy of his clan who had already lost an arm and a leg, his heart was filled with pain. Although it wasn't difficult to regrow a severed arm. However, the genius of the Su family right now was clearly dispirited, and no longer had his former glory. His belief of being invincible had been completely destroyed by the siege of Lin Yu. The Tao heart was very important, and it was obvious that his Tao heart had already collapsed. Even under the protection of his own ancestor, his arm had still been mercilessly chopped off by a cultivator of the same level as him, and he couldn't even resist. This was the main reason why his Tao heart had collapsed. "I'll make sure he pays you back double," said the Su clan patriarch, his eyes filled with killing intent. "Patriarch, kill him." The man with the folding fan had a dejected look on his face. When he heard Lin Yu's name, his eyes regained their luster. "Now, let's go and see the 8th grade alchemist," the Su family's ancestor said. The most important thing now was to bring the 8th grade alchemist into his family, and then kill Lin Yu in 2 days. Lin Yu left the item that the Su family's ancestor had left in his hand in his room. Then, he put on a black robe and went to a restaurant. A message appeared on the Su family's ancestor's token. The location had been sent to his token. This was something left behind by Lin Yu. In a restaurant in the city. Lin Yu was dressed in a black robe, and his face couldn't be seen clearly. At this moment, he was sitting on a stool, waiting quietly. Not long after, the Su family's ancestor arrived. His eyes were filled with excitement. "Greetings, 8th grade alchemist." There was no one in the restaurant. Lin Yu had already booked the 2nd floor. He was the only one present, so the Su family's ancestor recognized Lin Yu at a glance. Seeing that Lin Yu didn't say anything, the Su family's ancestor sat opposite him with a smile. His attitude was very good. "Sir, you should know the purpose of my trip." "Of course." Lin Yu's voice was hoarse. "I wonder if I can confirm your alchemy skills?" The Su family's ancestor said with a smile, "But sir, don't misunderstand. I'm afraid that other people who fish for fame will impersonate you. Sir's alchemy skills are unprecedented. When I saw the pills you refined at the auction, I already knew a thing or two." "Of course, there's no problem," Lin Yu said. He revealed the universe fire in his hand. The moment the universe fire appeared in Lin Yu's palm, the Su family's ancestor's expression changed slightly. Even if Lin Yu didn't deliberately target him, he still felt the threat from the universe fire. The fire was blazing, as if it could burn everything between heaven and earth. As Lin Yu analyzed a medicinal herb, a rich medicinal fragrance attacked. There wasn't a trace of impurities in it. All of them were removed. This was a 2,000-year-old medicinal herb. Ordinary people couldn't do it so perfectly. When Lin Yu took out the universe fire, the Su family's ancestor already knew that the black-robed man in front of him was definitely not a simple alchemist. because of how difficult it was to obtain the strange fire between heaven and earth. The rank of the universe fire was unimaginable. The increase in alchemy might be more than a few times. Sir, you've already achieved great success on the path of alchemy. It's only a matter of time before you ascend to the great Tao. If you join the Su family, I can guarantee that I'll do my best to satisfy your conditions. The Su family's patriarch extended an invitation. The Su family's ancestor saw that the two of them were sitting here. Both of them were well aware of it. If this 8th-grade alchemist didn't have the intention to join a big force, he wouldn't have released such news at the auction. Then I'll have to see your sincerity. Lin Yu's voice was still hoarse. He wanted to extort a sum of money from the Su family's ancestor at the end. The Su family's ancestor couldn't help but reveal a difficult expression, but the 8th-grade alchemist was right. If he wanted others to join, he had to show enough sincerity. To be honest, in order to get the opportunity to meet you, I have almost taken out all the source stones this time. If you don't mind, I'm willing to take out cultivation techniques and so on. The Su family's ancestor said. Since the person in front of him had already said so, it was nothing more than a test of the Su family's foundation. That's good too, Lin Yu replied. However, the corners of his mouth had already revealed a smile. This ancient technique was created by my Su family's first ancestor, but because of the passage of time, part of it has been lost. Even so, it can help people to cultivate to the 9th step. The Su family's ancestor took out an ancient book that was copied. On it was written the two bold and powerful words ancient technique. After Lin Yu took the ancient book, he flipped through it briefly. This cultivation technique doesn't seem to be of much use to me, Lin Yu muttered at this moment. He revealed the cultivation method he was cultivating. Although he deliberately concealed it, the Tao induction scripture was so mysterious that even the Su family's ancestor was slightly shocked. I didn't expect you to have such a profound cultivation technique. I'm sorry for being presumptuous. The Su family's ancestor gritted his teeth. He thought for a while, then finally gritted his teeth and said, I obtained this traversing jade palace from a ruin. Cultivating in it can increase one's speed by more than 3 times. I think it will be of some use to you, sir. The Su family's ancestor took out a palm-sized jade carving. It had the appearance of a palace, and the Tao of space-time flowed on it. Lin Yu let out a soft cry of surprise, revealing a look of curiosity. This thing is not bad, Lin Yu said. In that case, I also see the Su family's sincerity. However, in terms of foundation, is it worth me going? Lin Yu was puzzled at this moment. Sir, you don't have to worry about that. The Su clan has 3 powerful cultivators in the 8th step, and we have countless resources. We also have a spirit spring that provides an endless stream of baptism. It allows people to quickly advance, and it can even help cultivators break through to the 9th step. Lin Yu nodded and said, In that case, I'm relieved. Chapter 1453. He had already scouted out everything about the Su family's patriarch. I wonder if you can wait for me for 2 days. I'll bring you to the Su family, the Su family's patriarch said. When the time comes, you can just use the token to pass the order, Lin Yu replied. Thank you for your understanding. The Su family's patriarch cupped his fist. After Lin Yu put away the 2 items, the Su family's patriarch watched as Lin Yu put away the ancient mantra. Although his expression was a little ugly, he did not say anything. The 2 of them returned to their respective residences. Lin Yu went to the residence of the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion, and Xing followed him. This time, there was a hint of worry in Xing's eyes. They will attack me in 2 days, Lin Yu said calmly. If they dare to attack you, they must have made full preparations. Are you okay? Xing was worried. Lin Yu shook his head indifferently. The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion nodded and said, I haven't moved my old bones for a long time. Because of the drunken immortal wine that Lin Yu had given him, he was almost restored to the 8th step. In addition, he was originally a 9th step powerhouse, so he was not afraid at all in the face of an 8th step cultivator. When the time comes, spare the Su family's patriarch's life, Lin Yu said deliberately. Xing did not understand how confident Lin Yu was. However, after the previous incident, he had changed his opinion of Lin Yu. He had always been unexpected. Now, even if he was facing many 8th step cultivators, he probably still had some tricks up his sleeve. Otherwise, he would not be so confident. After the three of them discussed things, Lin Yu gave Xing the ancient mantra and said, This is the cultivation method you need. It's of a higher level than the incomplete technique. Xing took the ancient book. After seeing the name on it, he was shocked and said, This is the Su family's ancient mantra. Where did you get it? Lin Yu replied, Of course it's with the Su family's ancestor. Lin Yu. Thank you. Xing's eyes were filled with gratitude as he looked at Lin Yu affectionately. After that, Lin Yu left. He was afraid that Xing was a rabbit. After returning to his room, he took out the items he had obtained from the Su family's great ancestor. It was a palace made of jade, and there were faint space-time laws on it. After Lin Yu inspected it, he said slowly, This object should have been damaged in the past. In this world, the suppression of Tao laws was terrifying. Although Lin Yu had previously thought of using space-time laws to create a mystic ground that could slow down the flow of time, he had no choice but to give up in the end. However, now that he had obtained this artifact, in addition to his mastery of the space-time Tao law, repairing this artifact had become much easier. Lin Yu went into seclusion. A few hours passed. This place had been completely enveloped by the space-time Tao law. The models on the Jade Palace were peeling off, and it was once again perfect and flawless. This palace has some tricks up its sleeve. Lin Yu finally opened his eyes. This Jade Palace must have been an incredible artifact in the past. After Lin Yu's restoration, cultivating inside could slow down the flow of time by 10 times. This meant that cultivating inside for 1 day was equivalent to cultivating for 10 days in the outside world. However, this was not the full power of the Jade Palace. It could be said that Lin Yu, who had mastered the complete spacetime Tao law, had not restored the palace to its original state even after a few hours of restoration. If restored, it should be comparable to the spacetime palace left behind by ancestor Lin Xian, Lin Yu said with certainty. If that was the case, one could imagine how precious this Jade Palace was. Just as Lin Yu was about to enter cultivation to prepare for the final battle, Lin Yu suddenly heard a voice. Yu Linglong arrived outside the room. Lin Yu, are you here? Yu Linglong knocked on the door. Come in. Lin Yu removed the restriction. Yu Linglong's senses were sharp, and she was already at the peak of the 7th step. What a rich power of time and space! Yu Linglong was shocked, but she did not show it. Miss Yu, why are you looking for me? Lin Yu asked. I'm really sorry for drinking your immortal wine that day. I don't like to owe people, so before I leave I'd like to treat you to a drink, Yu Linglong said straightforwardly. If you're sorry, there's no need for that. I don't care much about that immortal wine, Lin Yu said. Yu Linglong's delicate body trembled slightly. However, she immediately said, In that case, I'd like to treat you to a drink. Sure, Lin Yu replied. It was hard to find a soulmate in wine in this world. Since Yu Linglong wanted to drink, he would let her. When they arrived at the pavilion, the dishes had already been prepared. A rich aroma of wine filled the air. Obviously, the quality of the wine was not low. It should be a treasure of the Mingyue nunnery. Lu Rushi was also there. She was lying on the ground and pouring wine into several cups. Young Master Lin, you're here. Please take a seat. Lu Rushi saw Lin Yu and extended her hand slightly, gesturing for Lin Yu to take a seat. I didn't expect that I would be so lucky to have two peerless beauties accompany me, Lin Yu said. Why can't I see the happiness on your face? Yu Linglong said directly. Indeed, Lin Yu was just being polite. In fact, there was not much happiness on his face. Lin Yu smiled and sat down. It wasn't easy to invite young Master Lin here. It's our fortune, Lu Rushi teased. Yu Linglong had looked for Lin Yu once, but he was refining pills and she did not want to disturb him, so she left it at that. Do you think we should punish ourselves? Yu Linglong looked at the wine in her cup. Yes. Lin Yu nodded and drank the wine in his cup. This is the first time I've drunk wine with Mr. Lin. I heard from junior sister Yu that Mr. Lin has a great tolerance. You'll have to let me win today. Lu Rushi had a smile on her face. Amidst her elegance, there was a hint of charm. After saying that, she personally filled Lin Yu's cup and held it with both hands, toasting to Lin Yu. You flatter me, Lin Yu replied. Yu Linglong frowned and said, I hate these complicated formalities the most. Come, Lin Yu, drink 3 cups. Lin Yu nodded with a smile. Yu Linglong's temperament was very different from that of Lu Rushi's. After 3 rounds of wine, Lin Yu could not help but say, Isn't it a little unkind of you to do this? You're a man. Didn't you say that it's our fortune to drink with you? Shouldn't we drink more? Yu Linglong said. That's true. Lin Yu looked at his wine cup and nodded slightly. This wine was not enough to make Lin Yu drunk. At most, it made him feel a little hot. However, at that moment, Yu Linglong and Lu Rushi were unable to endure it any longer. Their entire bodies were flushed red. Lu Rushi, especially, obviously did not drink often. She spilled a lot of wine when she poured. I don't believe that the 2 of us can't outdrink you, Yu Linglong said. After drinking, she was completely different from her usual self. Lu Rushi poured the wine, but after a long time, she could not pour a single drop. So there's no more. Lu Rushi's face was red. She said, Young Master Lin, please wait for a moment. I'll go get it. No need. I'll pour it for you, Lin Yu said. Lu Rushi poured almost all of the wine on the table. Oh right. My senior sister has not tried the divine wine yet. I wonder if you could do me the honor of letting my senior sister have a taste? Yu Linglong said. She no longer had too many concerns when it came to wine. Of course, Lin Yu replied. He still had a few jars of this wine. Now that his inner world was gradually unsealed, he could take them all out. In the past, it was just a gift from tomorrow's revered lord to taste it. He did not expect it to become a rare divine item after coming to this world. Chapter 1454. Lin Yu took out a few bottles of drunken immortal wine. Since Mr. Lin is willing to spend so much money, why don't I pour the wine for you? Yu Linglong smiled. She rarely smiled, but now it seemed like there was something special about it. Junior sister, you look good when you smile, Lu Rushi said slowly as she lay on her side. After hearing Lu Rushi's words, Yu Linglong's face fell. Since it's drunken immortal wine, let's drink together, Lu Rushi said. Lin Yu nodded as well. The 3 of them drank together. Mr. Lin is the most talented genius I've ever seen in the entire Go-Chin ancient nation, be it in terms of strength, cultivation, or other aspects, Lu Rushi said slowly with a slightly dazed look in her eyes. Lu Rushi raised her wine cup. You flatter me, Lin Yu replied. After the 2 of them drank, the scene fell into silence. Why don't I dance for you, Mr. Lin? Lu Rushi said, breaking the silence. Even though she was a little drunk, she still had a good eye for things. She instantly broke the silence. I didn't expect to have a chance to enjoy the dance of the Holy Lady of Bright Moon Nunnery. Lin Yu smiled. Is it fake? Yu Linglong asked. Every word is true, Lin Yu replied. Let's drink. Yu Linglong supported her head with one hand and raised her cup with the other. She looked at Lin Yu. As Lu Rushi's body danced, she was graceful and graceful. There was charm in her agility. She was like a fairy. Even though there was no music, it was still very exciting. I think you can try dancing with Holy Lady Lu, Lin Yu said. No way, Yu Linglong said. I only know how to drink. I'm going. There won't be anyone to drink with you for a while. We have a clear division of labor. I won't neglect you. Lu Rushi raised her cup. Lin Yu nodded. Without saying anything, he drank the wine in his hand. God knows how much wine he drank. Lin Yu's consciousness gradually disappeared. It was as if he had returned to the 12 universes. It was as if the final black calamity had been ended. He returned to the primordial continent from the 12 universes and lived in seclusion with the Jade Pure Goddess, Qinyi, and the others. He farmed at the foot of the southern mountain and lived a carefree life. Lin Yu didn't know how much he had drunk. Yu Linglong and Lu Rushi also blushed. His clothes gradually came off. Yu Linglong lay on top of Lin Yu, Lu Rushi was beside him. The next morning, the sun shone down. The red light of the rising sun shone through the roof. Lu Rushi and Yu Linglong lay on Lin Yu's chest. Their eyelashes fluttered as they gradually woke up. Lin Yu's cultivation had already broken through to the 8th step. This was the uniqueness of Mingyue Nunnery's cultivation method. Especially since Lu Rushi was a saintess, and Yu Linglong was also one of the potential saintesses. The effect it brought was almost terrifying. All the hidden dangers in Lin Yu's body had been eliminated. Lin Yu put on his clothes. It wasn't until 4 hours later that Yu Linglong and Lu Rushi slowly woke up. The two of them looked at each other and saw each other's white shoulders. When they recalled everything that had happened yesterday, they couldn't help but blush. It seemed that, yesterday, it was the two of them who had made Lin Yu. At this moment, Lu Rushi remembered that as a saintess, she had to maintain her virginity before the Sage Monarch Conference. But now, I will be responsible for both of you, Lin Yu said calmly. In the Sage Monarch Conference a year later, I will win first place and make both of you my rightful women. Lin Yu was indifferent. He had always been like this. Since he had done it, he would be responsible for a woman. The two of them looked at Lin Yu's back. Yu Linglong said with anger, "Don't let anyone know about what happened last night." Lin Yu nodded. "Young Master Lin, let's eat together. Let's go." Lu Rushi turned her back to Lin Yu. She revealed her perfect back that made people daydream. She quickly put on her clothes. After the three of them ate, Lin Yu returned to his room. Yu Linglong was so angry that she gritted her teeth and said, "Why did I become like that yesterday? No matter how perfect he is, he shouldn't have made me like that." But, she thought of last night and her face couldn't help but blush. In the end, Yu Linglong regained her calmness and stopped thinking about it. I hope that he will keep his promise at that time. Otherwise, senior sister's reputation will be completely ruined and you will be punished by the Mingyue Nunnery and even the upper echelons. When the upper echelons of the Mingyue Nunnery were mentioned, Yu Linglong couldn't help but frown deeply. They returned to their room. Lin Yu felt that a clear power seemed to have appeared in his body. It came from the cultivation method that Yu Linglong and Lu Rushi practiced. The 8th step. Lin Yu sighed. Even he didn't completely expect what happened yesterday. However, since it had already happened, Lin Yu naturally wouldn't leave it alone. It seems to be able to make me break through without any bottleneck. Lin Yu was deep in thought at this time. He didn't know the specific magical effects of Mingyue Nunnery's cultivation method. However, he could still find out a thing or two about it when he examined his body. A day later, Yu Linglong and Lu Rushi left. Before they left a letter for Lin Yu. It was written by Lu Rushi. The general meaning was to explain the magical effects of the power in Lin Yu's body. It also said that if he wanted to break through to the 10th step, he had to find the other saintess who had gone missing. Lin Yu closed the letter with a calm expression. Even if he didn't use these, he could still break through to the 10th step. He had absolute confidence. The pavilion master of Divine Secret Pavilion had already arrived at Lin Yu's room. "Let's go. It's the last battle in Fuho country," Lin Yu said. At this time, a black light screen appeared outside the Bright Moon Hotel. Then, a deep black hole appeared on the ground, pulling the Bright Moon Hotel into a strange space. In the blink of an eye, it was so dark that one couldn't even see their own fingers. However, a faint light soon lit up. 5 cultivators of the 8th step and the Sky Sword Sex Elder were now in 6 positions of the hotel. "Lin Yu, come out and die," the Su family's ancestor sternly scolded. He had been waiting for 2 days. They waited for the Saintess of Mingyuan Nunnery to leave before they took action to avoid Mingyuan Nunnery's dissatisfaction. The whole ground shook, and the living beings in Monarch City were all shocked. They didn't know what had happened in Abrupt City. The Bright Moon Hotel disappeared, someone said in surprise. When they got closer, they saw that the Bright Moon Hotel had turned into a bottomless abyss. It could even swallow light. Their cultivation was low, so when they saw the abyss, their divine consciousness was irreparably damaged. "This seems to be the legendary restriction that has been lost," someone said. "It can imprison everything. Even 9th step cultivators can't break free in a short time. 8th and 7th step cultivators can't break free. They can only be slaughtered." Someone was shocked. They thought of the few 8th step cultivators who hadn't left and Lin Yu. "It seems like someone is targeting Lin Yu." Someone had already guessed. In the abyss, Lin Yu and the other 2 slowly walked out of the Bright Moon Hotel. "Step back," Lin Yu said to Xing. His 7th step cultivation was no longer of much use here. He would only be a burden. Xing didn't act arrogantly. After nodding, he entered the Bright Moon Hotel. "Pavilion Lord of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion, do you insist on seeking death?" the Sky Sword Sex Elder said coldly. He saw the Pavilion Lord of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion standing beside Lin Yu. He was very calm. After hearing this, the Pavilion Lord of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion smiled and said, "It's been a long time since an 8th step kid has spoken to me like this. Not bad, not bad. The younger generation will surpass us in time. Lin Yu, hand over everything. Kneel down and kowtow to me a few times. I'll consider letting you die a quick death." The Su family's ancestor had long wanted to kill Lin Yu, so he couldn't let him go. Chapter 1455. "I thought you would be very smart, but I didn't expect that you would still dare to stay here for 2 days, the Su family's patriarch said slowly. His face gradually revealed a sinister expression. He had already tolerated Lin Yu for 2 days. Every time he thought of the auction and his own prodigy, his heart would shatter. The hatred in his heart would increase every day. "Are you all very smart?" Lin Yu looked at the people surrounding him indifferently. "I don't know why you can still remain so calm. Could it be that you've been scared silly?" An 8th step powerhouse said slowly. However, they were old monsters who had lived for thousands of years after all. At this moment, they looked at Lin Yu and were not in a hurry to make a move. Since Lin Yu dared to stay here, it meant that he might have a trump card. Therefore, they did not take the initiative to attack. Instead, they wanted to see what Lin Yu was relying on to stay here. "No need to talk nonsense. Kill him," the Su family's patriarch said directly. His eyes were filled with endless killing intent. The Sky Rapier Sex Patriarch also made a move at this moment. This was because Lin Yu had something on him that he wanted to obtain. It was the book in the Forbidden Area. "Are you all worried? You want to know what I'm relying on? Alright, I'll show you." Lin Yu's lips curled into a smile. A terrifying aura erupted from his body. The power that surpassed the 7th step wreaked havoc here. The few of them were shocked. They clearly knew that Lin Yu had broken through to the 7th step not long ago with the help of a 7th step prodigy's power. However, now, he had caught up with them. This was simply inconceivable for old monsters like them who had cultivated for thousands of years. A person who could go from the 6th step to the 8th step in just a few days had never been heard of since ancient times. Impossible. It's only been a few days. How could you reach the 8th step? The Su family's patriarch was shocked. He thought of Lin Yu's powerful spiritual force. At this moment, he could not help but fall into deep thought. Lin Yu's divine will was even stronger than theirs. I know. So your cultivation has only dropped. Now it's just recovering. The elder from the Sky Rapier sect was shocked. However, Lin Yu's body clearly did not have the aura of age. This meant that his true age was not very old. But they were wrong from the start. I have roamed the heavens and earth for countless years. You are nothing but ant. Lin Yu's eyes were filled with vicissitudes of life. He had been cultivating in the universe and the land of origin for an unknown number of years. It could be counted in tens of thousands of years. In front of Lin Yu, these people's shrewdness, scheming, and all their means seemed so laughable. Do you guys know that all methods are nothing in the face of absolute power? Lin Yu waved his hand and imprinted the power of a few ancient characters into the void. Now, it was not just a few 8th-step cultivators who wanted to kill Lin Yu and trap him here. Moreover, Lin Yu had been waiting for a long time. Now that they had sealed this place, Lin Yu could take advantage of the situation. None of the people here could leave today. After the shock, these people quickly calmed down. They had experienced countless battles in their lives. Even if they were to face Lin Yu's current cultivation speed, they still felt incomparable pressure. However, they still quickly calmed down. No matter how fast his breakthrough speed is, he is only an 8th-step cultivator now. There are 6 of us here, the Su family's patriarch said. However, after saying those words, some people started to lose their confidence. They thought of their own prodigy. At that time, he had been at the 7th step but had still been defeated by Lin Yu, who was at the 6th step. Even if they had joined forces to besiege him, they had still suffered a great defeat. Now that they were in the same realm, perhaps, some people were unwilling to believe this fact. After the 8th step, the gap of 1 level is even more terrifying than the gap of 1 level before. Now we are already at the 2nd or 3rd level. Why should we be afraid of him? The Su family's patriarch spoke again. This was the truth. At the final realm, the gap of 1 level was unimaginable. Moreover, Lin Yu had just broken through, so his realm was still unstable. Lin Yu did not deny this fact. Originally, before he had obtained the power of Yu Linglong and Lu Rushi's cultivation techniques, he had wanted to use the power of the Ruler of Gods badge to multiply his strength by 100 times. His spiritual force and combat strength were already not weaker than an 8th-step cultivator. He had the strength to fight. However, now that he had used the power of the Bright Moon Nunnery Saintess, he had broken through to the 8th step. The few people here no longer posed any threat to Lin Yu. Damn it, he has already sealed this place. Someone tried to break the seal, but under the power of the ancient characters, he was almost seriously injured. There is no need to resist stubbornly, Lin Yu said faintly. Lin Yu, leave one for me. A gray power erupted from the Pavilion Lord of the Sky's secret pavilion, as if it could deduce all the chi in the world. Before he made his move, he had already deduced all the movements of the Sky Sword Sect's elder. At this moment, he directly made his move. The tortoiseshell in his hand burst out with power, which actually complemented the origin ancient characters used by Lin Yu. The Pavilion Lord of the Sky's secret pavilion was not surprised by this. Before this, he already knew that Lin Yu was hiding many secrets. The 7th step. Do you think you can go against the flow and kill the immortals? The Sky Sword Sect's elder shouted. Even though he knew that the Pavilion Lord of the Sky's secret pavilion had once been an expert of the ninth step, his realm had now fallen. "You are already old," the Sky Sword Sex Elder shouted. 7 large swords appeared behind him, forming a sword formation in the void. They were strong and heavy, carrying the momentum of 1,000 caddies as they charged toward the Pavilion Lord of the Sky's secret pavilion. However, the Pavilion Lord of the Sky's secret pavilion turned sideways in the void, as if he was taking a stroll in the courtyard, and lightly tapped the sword with the back of his finger. The incomparably ferocious-looking great sword actually shattered into pieces. "The wandering dragon is stranded. No, I think a starving camel is still bigger than a horse." The Pavilion Lord of the Sky's secret pavilion smiled calmly. He tapped a few times, as if he had found the weakest point of the large sword. The large sword was as fragile as porcelain, and it was completely shattered by the Pavilion Lord of the Sky's secret pavilion. At this moment Lin Yu also moved. He did not want to waste any more words with these people. The Great Void 8 divisions were used. In an instant the place became incomparably dark, and in a short period of time, they lost all 5 senses. Although this was only a matter of an instant, in a battle, time often determined the outcome. Puff, in just an instant, someone was bleeding. Lin Yu was merciless. The dragon claw of the Great Void 8 divisions appeared and pierced through a person's chest. That person's aura instantly withered. Although he had forced Lin Yu back at the first moment, preventing his life force from being destroyed, he had lost all his strength. He had also lost his fighting strength. Everyone was shocked. Lin Yu did not give them any chance. Ever since he had gone to the origin ground, he had rarely used the Great Void 8 divisions. In his hands it was still a great killing weapon. This was especially so now that he was at the half-step to utmost being realm. He had long deduced this skill to a higher level. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.